This is the second half of a two-part video about My Little Pony. Part 1 will be linked in the description, as well as the full version of this video. This video only exists to make watching the full version of this retrospective easier for those who watched the first half as it came out and want easier navigation. Additionally, YouTube only allows up to 100 chapters per video, and this video comes in at just under 100 episodes reviewed. The full version will be harder to navigate for those intending to see a particular episode's retrospective. It is not necessary to have seen the first part of this retrospective in order to understand the second part. If I make reference to an earlier review, I will try to briefly recap that review to make individual sections easier to follow. In case you are stumbling upon this video without having seen the first one, I'll reiterate what exactly this video is beyond what the title says. This is a retrospective of My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic that I am writing despite not having seen the show. I will watch an episode, then write whatever about it. It is a react-trospective in the sense that it is too tempered to be a reaction video, but also lacks the in-depth research to constitute a retrospective. Essentially, this is a review of a show that's about a decade out of time, but the intended experience is more about watching someone experience MLP for the first time anyway. This intro section will be cut out of the full-length version of the video, so it isn't too important to keep going. So, without further ado, let's get straight back into where we left off. Season 6. The Crystalling. Starlight Glimmer is nervous about becoming Twilight Sparkle's new student, her unpreparedness represented by the fact that she can't even find her way around the massive castle with its identical-looking walls. Meanwhile, the rest of the main six are preparing for the Crystalling, a ceremony in the Crystal Empire where the newborn baby will be admired by the ponies of the Empire, and that admiration will strengthen the Crystal Heart. Since they'll be headed to the Crystal Empire anyway, Starlight is given her first friendship lesson, to reunite with her very first friend, Sunburst. Sunburst, as the episode recaps, is the reason why Starlight turned on the idea of cutie marks and removed them from an entire village with plans to take over the rest of Equestria. She's moved on from this, technically, though she is still ashamed of her past actions and does not want her old friend to know about them. So she tries to stall, encouraging Spike to regale her and the rest of the Empire the tales of how he saved the day a few seasons ago. For someone who's taken a month-long break between watching this episode and the one before, in affordance for how these retrospectives are made, this was nice to see. It was probably nicer for the folks who had to wait a year between seasons too. Unable to stall any longer, Starlight is finally forced to reunite with Sunburst, who she is told is an accomplished wizard due to his early mastery of magic. But their meeting, in spite of Twilight's over-preparedness, is short and awkward, with neither pony really explaining where they've been or what they've been up to. Twilight and the others have recently met up with a disheveled Shining Armor, who hasn't slept at all since the baby was born. They agree to take on some of the responsibilities for the Crystalling, so he and Cadence can both have a break from this newborn baby. The first alicorn born in so long, the other princesses thought it was impossible. They finish the preparations and only need to have the baby brought over, but this baby's a strong flyer with no control of its magic, and it cries so loud that the crystal heart shatters, just as the crowd has gathered for the ceremony. Twilight Sparkle and the other princesses lead the search for a way to fix the shattered crystal heart, also trying to frantically take care of the baby who's teleporting around and blasting magic. Twilight manages to find a spell, but it is destroyed after she reads it once, making her have to recreate it from memory. Starlight Glimmer's given up on rekindling her friendship with Sunburst, returning to the castle in failure, when she and Spike notice the snow falling and realize something's wrong. When she arrives back at the castle, she's told about Twilight's discovered spell, and told to find Sunburst as his wizard abilities may help them with the shaky spell's success. But when she returns to his house, he confesses he's not actually a wizard and just lives in a messy library. As it turns out, he knows a lot about magic, but is a poor practitioner himself. Starlight also confesses that she turned villainous from her failure to keep up with him, recapping a bit of what's led up to the event when she mentions the spell and the heart, which Sunburst realizes won't actually work due to the age of the artifact. Due to the impending freezing weather, the citizens of the Crystal Empire are ordered to find shelter, but they refuse to leave because they've been waiting for a crystalling of this importance for years. But when Shining Armor arrives, ordering them back, they listen to him, only to be stopped by Sunburst, who leads them back to the castle, as he points out the spell to repair the Crystal Heart will only work if they have enough power from the crystalling ceremony itself. He directs the rest of the ponies in the various spells and ceremonies needed to perform the crystalling and repair the heart, all of which go off well, and the day is saved as the nasty weather gets rolled back. Sunburst is selected as the Crystaller for the ceremony, given a permanent job by Shining Armor to work alongside the royal family, the exact sort of position that Starlight Glimmer thought he already had at the start of the episode. Her being able to fix her friendship with the guy and make the connections needed to put him in the spot he belonged is how she was able to justify being Twilight Sparkle's student. Everybody ending up with the positions that they never thought they deserved, but importantly the positions other ponies believed they were capable of. Sunburst believed that Starlight was a big shot student of one of the princesses, but Starlight herself didn't think she was worthy of living up to that idea, and was ashamed that she may need to admit as such. Starlight thought that Sunburst was an accomplished wizard, but he was just a shut-in who failed to actually perform when it came time to prove his skill. And it's not just the two of them. Twilight came up with this elaborate list of things to do for her new student to learn her first friendship lesson, as she was nervous about not being a good teacher. This is in spite of her student thinking that she was the one unworthy to learn. So by the end of the episode, nobody's position really changes, and no one accomplishes what they thought they could do, but rather what those closest to them believed they were capable of. This episode is a series of characters with imposter syndrome, realizing that they really do belong in the positions that they've earned after all. The Gift of Maud Pie. Rarity and Pinkie Pie are going to Manhattan so Rarity can pick out a spot for her new boutique, while Pinkie Pie meets with her sister Maud for a gift exchange. Pinkie's already picked out the perfect gift for her sister, a carrying case for Boulder, her pet rock. But when they make their way to the only store that sells rock carrying cases, it's closed. Rarity helps her friend to pick out a new gift, but nothing compares to the case itself, and Pinkie Pie is beginning to worry Maud's gift will once again be better than hers. Then she sees a man with the exact case she wanted, and barters with him for it, trading her party cannon to get her sister the perfect gift. The gift exchange begins, and Maud presumably loves the case, but Pinkie's present was scented confetti for her party cannon, something she can no longer use. When Maud learns that her sister traded one of her most prized possessions for her gift, she uses her Maud sense, which is like Pinkie's sense, to track down the man who made the exchange, demanding they trade back. This unfortunately means that Pinkie has now received two great gifts from her sister, the confetti and the cannon, while Pinkie hasn't actually given anything to Maud. But before she can fret too much, Maud points out that it was never a competition, as gifts are supposed to be given for the recipient, not the pleasure or bragging rights of the one who gives the gift. On your marks. The Cutie Mark Crusaders hold another meeting, their first since they got their marks, only to realize that they don't really know what to do now that they're no longer seeking them. They attempt to do the thing that got them their marks, helping other ponies, but as every pony in Ponyville seems to be happy with their marks, they realize they have the free time to do anything. Each of the CMCs has their own idea on what to do, and they agree to go their separate ways to try these things individually. Scootaloo goes bungee jumping while Sweetie Belle crochets badly, though they had fun with the activities. Who did not have fun was Apple Bloom, as she couldn't figure out a fun solo activity she enjoyed, even attempting to do partner dancing just so she wouldn't be alone. All that happened was that she danced badly in front of Tinder Taps, a talented but shy dancer, before she gave up. She worries she has no purpose in life without her friends, but they remind her that just because they spend some time apart doesn't mean they can't spend time together, and they agree to help out Tinder Taps with his stage fright. They achieve this by having Apple Bloom go out on stage, dancing terribly, and making the crowd laugh at her. Realizing he can't do any worse than Apple Bloom, Tinder Taps gets over his stage fright and earns a cutie mark for the dance. Two opposite-sounding ideas can be true at the same time, that anything worth doing is worth doing well, and anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. While the concept of a cutie mark is about finding one special talent and dedicating one's life to it, this doesn't mean that the cutie mark has to be a limiting factor. You're allowed to do things you're not good at, and if anything, doing things that are explicitly outside your field of expertise is how you gain a better appreciation for the things you do well. For example, the Cutie Mark Crusaders go around doing stuff they're bad at, and this is how they learn to help Tinder Taps. If Apple Bloom had never taken the risk of dancing badly, she would have lacked the inspiration to dance badly enough to encourage another pony to get his cutie mark, the thing she's meant to be talented at. If everything you do in life is dedicated to a specific medium, then you'll actually stifle your growth a lot. You have to go out and try things knowing you'll fail, but not caring to really grow. This is a lesson the Crusaders already knew. They spent 5 seasons trying a bunch of things and assuming they would fail, then continuing to try new things in the future. One could even argue that they earned their cutie marks in failure, as in, they failed to get cutie marks so many times, they became experts at failing. And what does an expert do but teach others how to fail, in this case, starting out by being less afraid of failure themselves. Gauntlet of Fire. Every dragon is called back to the Dragonlands, and the Dragon Lord is abdicating the throne due to old age. He announces that the dragon who returns his scepter from a volcano will be the new Dragon Lord. At first he dismisses Spike, who doesn't want to compete, until he sees the rest of the dragons talking about their plans to pillage Ponyville should they win. As the dragons are racing there, Spike meets and saves the life of Ember, the dragon princess who was ordered not to compete because she is too small. They agree to cover for each other, Spike keeping her competition a secret, as she doesn't talk to anyone about the ponies, Rarity and Twilight following him. As they work together, Ember slowly learns the value of friendship, despite dragons traditionally not having friends the way ponies do. She even saves Spike when he's attacked by Garble, who wants the scepter for himself, and Spike's able to grab it first, becoming the Dragon Lord for a brief moment, before handing the power to the princess because he does not want to leave his friends behind. Ember, who now understands friendship, takes the mantle of Lord as she rules over the dragons with a less authoritative stance. No Second Prances. Twilight Sparkle has invited Princess Celestia to a dinner, telling Starlight that her friendship homework is to make a new friend and invite her as their fourth. Starlight wanders around Ponyville trying to make a friend, but she keeps failing because she attempts to improve everything the other ponies are doing. Finally, she meets another pony at the spa who has the same complaints, and they agree to be new friends due to how much they have in common. Twilight is shocked to find out that this new friend is the great and powerful Trixie, though when she tries to explain why she takes exception to this, she only offends Starlight. Allegedly, Twilight has forgiven Trixie for everything she did, but the fact that she visibly distrusts the other pony means that she's slow to forgive, and this means that she likely hasn't forgiven Starlight either, further evidenced by the fact that she keeps trying to micromanage the other pony's friendship quest. Twilight and Starlight agree to work together on a stage show, one meant to represent Trixie's foray back into polite society. They're going to do a dangerous trick together by using Starlight's magic, but Twilight Sparkle tells off her student for potentially missing the planned dinner for these theatrics. But while she's talking to her student, Trixie begins to brag about winning against Twilight, revealing her intention to make a friend purely to show off and brag about her rather than a real connection, that she was only trying to befriend Starlight to get back at someone. Or so it seems. Starlight runs away, furious that no pony is going to forgive her, least of all her teacher, and the only ones who are interested in spending time with her are the ones trying to capitalize on her villainous past. Yet Trixie's also sad that she chased off her only real friend because she couldn't get over the jealousy that made her act the way she did before, wondering if the reason she's not being forgiven is because she really doesn't deserve to be. Twilight finally realizes that sure, Starlight and Trixie weren't great influences on one another, but they were far better for each other than isolation would have been. A bad friend is better than no friends, especially in the end when Trixie attempts a dangerous trick while despondent, like she doesn't care if she ends up injured. Starlight returns to save her friend even at the cost of missing the dinner, and the two wind up celebrating with the gathered crowd. Sometimes the reason ponies misbehave is because they don't have anything to lose. When they make a few friends, they start to care about the well-being of those around them. This is how even Twilight learns not to interfere with friendship, nor to tell others how they ought to meet ponies. Newbie Dash. Rainbow Dash finally gets promoted to the Wonderbolt proper, only to embarrass herself on her first day when she falls into a trash can, earning her the nickname Rainbow Crash, the same thing she was called by bullies as a child. She's worried that, as the newest and weakest flyer, she's going to stand out by being the worst of the bunch, a point driven home as she is hazed with cleaning the entire living quarters. Rainbow Dash tries and fails to get a new nickname by mimicking her main 6 friends, but the Wonderbolts chastise her attempts, telling her to keep practicing instead of trying to show off. Her concerns come from the fact that she's a poor flyer despite the fact that she grew up as one of the best. This is just the reality of any time one advances in life through merit. People tend to rise through the ranks right up until the point where they reach the limits of their competence. The reward for being the best in flight school is to be the worst in the reserves. The reward for working your way up to be the best in the reserves is to be the worst Wonderbolt. So Dash comes up with a new plan to fake a lightning strike at the end of their routine to show off. This plan fails and she winds up crashing even more spectacularly, landing in a pile of cotton candy. Rainbow Dash worries that she's going to get kicked out of the Wonderbolts for messing with the routine this way, only for the others to be okay with it all. As it turns out, they all have embarrassing nicknames too, each named after some embarrassing thing they did in their first week. Like with most nicknames, people don't earn them for good accomplishments, but embarrassing moments. The difference between Rainbow Crash as an insult and Rainbow Crash as a nickname is whether the ones saying it are doing it out of respect or not. The nickname sounds like an insult, but being part of the group is how you know it's not. Context matters more than intent, because context is something you can only get from spending time with your friends. A heart's-warming tale. Starlight Glimmer is struggling to understand why ponies bother celebrating Heart's Warming Eve, so Twilight reads her the story A Christmas Carol, Heart's Warming Tale. This is the story of Snowball Frost, a magic user who resented the celebrations, played by her modern counterpart of Starlight. So she makes a magic potion to eliminate the holiday, literally skipping over the day on the calendar. Then she gets visited by 3 ghosts. The first one shows her the past and why she hates the holiday so much. As a filly, one of her teachers, Flintheart, told her that the holiday was a waste of time when she could be spending her days bettering Equestria. This ties into the idea of Scrooge's greed from the original tale. He considers himself a captain of industry, and that all the money he was making helps out the economy, giving a literal betterment to society around him, regardless of the unseen costs of this work. Unseen costs such as telling off employees for spending their time with loved ones. This cost isn't truly seen until the ghost of Heart's Warming Presents arrives. Not present like the time, but the actual gifts. She shows the value of the holiday through the exchanging of gifts, not because of the gifts themselves, but the sense of community made by them, ponies gathering in a single place to trade presents while celebrating together. Put this into comparison with Snowfall's idea of a celebration, where she sits alone in her dimly lit lab. Measuring the improvement of society is impossible to do because it isn't really tangible, but if it's a comparison between a big party everyone comes together to take part in, and everyone trudging through the snow ignoring each other, it's hard to justify the latter being an improvement. Finally, this episode's lesson is muddied a bit by a visit from the ghost of Heart's Warming Yet to Come, who shows her that the Wendigos are real and will destroy everything if they don't celebrate. Snowfall decides not to cast the spell after all, heading out to give gifts to the others and celebrate with a newfound appreciation for the holiday. Then Starlight takes the same lesson. The fault in our cutie marks. The Cutie Mark Crusaders are celebrating their ability to help any pony who needs it, only to find the one client who they cannot help, a griffin named Gabby. Gabby witnessed the events of the lost treasure of Griffinstone, and dedicated herself to being more like the ponies by learning the value of friendship. To do this, she wants to have a cutie mark of her own. The issue is that the Crusaders have never heard of any species but a pony getting a cutie mark, but this doesn't stop them from trying to find a purpose for Gabby anyway. They make a list like one of their old ones and go through it. The problem is that Gabby is good at everything, succeeding in helping the Crusaders help others, but still never developing a cutie mark. The CMCs are depressed about their failure until Gabby shows up with a cutie mark of her own, although she isn't eager to elaborate on this anomaly of anatomy. The Crusaders end up catching Gabby while she is trying to flee, catching her only because she stopped to help a stuck wagon. They learned the cutie mark she got was fake, and she only applied a fake one to make the CMCs feel better. This reveals to them that her real special talent was helping others all along, so they decide to make her a cutie mark of her own, one that matches the rest of the Crusaders as they induct her into the organization. Cutie marks have always been, at least to me, a confusing part of the lore of My Little Pony. They started out as sort of an assigned job before shifting to be more conceptual, a general vibe of what it is that a pony wants to do with their lives. This is why, for example, someone like Rarity has gems even though she's a fashion designer. So the general idea behind the search for a cutie mark is still to try to, as much as possible, not to define a definitive thing that you have to do in life, but to search for what feels right to do. This episode plays off of earlier episodes about cutie marks, addressing some of the confusion by ignoring it. Can griffins get cutie marks? The answer is yes, because Gabby gets one at the end of the episode as a gift. Sure, it's not a real cutie mark, but it lets her do all the same things as one. She can be a cutie mark Crusaders because she matches. She can show off that she has found her purpose in life, and many of the tricks and techniques that Gabby tried to get her mark were the same techniques used by the Crusaders themselves to get theirs. So sure, it isn't a real mark, but you have to ask yourself why it matters if the mark is real when all the things it represents are still true. The Saddle Row Review. The rest of the main six are trying to stop Rarity from reading a review of the opening of her Manhattan boutique, with their reasons explained in a series of flashbacks with the framing device of interviews with the buried lead. As they're trying to open the boutique, they encounter tons of problems with the store, with each pony put in charge of dealing with one of them. These ponies want to do things the way Rarity would want them to do, so they act out of character as they try to guess what that is. This, predictably, makes everything worse, as the ponies are not good at acting the way Rarity would want, and she's too busy to ask directly for every little thing. So they lock her in the window display as they come up with alternative solutions, doing things their own way as they decide to trust Rarity's decision-making skills. Not by asking her to tell them what to do, but trusting she made the right call in hiring them in the first place. The boutique's opening is a success, cutting back to the present where the true reason the main six didn't want her to read the review is revealed. They thought she was stressed enough and didn't want her to find out how close they were to disaster. Applejack's day off. Tired of Applejack always showing up late to their spa days because of how long it takes to do her chores, Rarity convinces Spike and Twilight to take over for a day so the two of them can actually take some time for themselves. AJ leaves a checklist for each chore and heads out, only for the spa to be so backed up they risk wasting the entire trip. As it turns out, they're backed up due to the low steam pressure from a small leak. This low pressure means ponies have to wait for these steam rooms, so the spa gives out warm towels during the wait. But the extra demand for towels means extra wash cycles for the towels, resulting in less steam pressure, contributing to the cycle. She fixes the leak but misses out on the spa day, so they return to check on Twilight to see if she's been keeping her chores under control to determine if they can spend even more time at the spa. But Twilight's been struggling to feed the pigs as most of the stuff on the list feels nonsensical. Applejack points out that every step of the process is important, explaining why she started doing each of them to address issues that have since been fixed. Realizing that she's working as inefficiently as the spa was, she agrees to let Twilight look over her work to check for habits that no longer have a purpose. In the end, the farm runs so efficiently that Applejack and Rarity can finally take their day off. Applejack realizes that sometimes ponies can get so caught up in routine, they stop to consider if the routine is still important. Flutter Brutter. Fluttershy's brother, Zephyr Breeze, has moved back in with her parents after yet another failed attempt to get a job. Despite Fluttershy's concerns, her parents are not inclined to tell their son to leave the house as he continues to mooch off them, moving things around and even ruining her father's cloud collection. So she decides to be assertive for them, telling her brother to move out, only for him to move in with her instead. Not wanting Zephyr to repeat his behavior, Fluttershy tries to force him to get a job by talking with several of her friends, but he tries to cut corners and generally fails to listen or do any of the work at these jobs she sets up for him, resulting in Zephyr going back to sleeping on her couch. So she stands up for herself again, kicking him out, only to find Zephyr sleeping in the woods, unable to even start a fire. Fluttershy relents and lets him stay with her again, this time on harsher conditions as he has to do anything she says. She and Rainbow Dash work together to encourage him to practice at being a main stylist, the thing he failed to do at the beginning, and soon Zephyr's able to graduate from beauty school with his newly discovered skills. I can't help but wonder if this episode isn't meant to represent some of the adult fans, a way of nudging them away from certain stereotypes by making a character meant to reflect them. Like, what if the stereotype of a brony actually got to meet the main six? They might find him a bit annoying, especially if he lived with them for an extended time. But I'm not inclined to really believe this, just because the show hasn't been quite so mean-spirited up to this point, so it could just be coincidence. After over 100 episodes, there's bound to be at least some plots that can be construed into just about any meaning. The episode itself is a bit more nuanced in its depiction of a character who's supposedly just a slacker. Zephyr admits that a major reason he keeps dropping out of things is because he is afraid to try. If he fails, then he's not good enough, but if he doesn't try, then he can tell himself that he would succeed, he just doesn't want to. This is especially pronounced by the fact that his sister has saved Equestria multiple times. Of course, someone comparing themselves to that would feel like nothing they do will be good enough. There's an argument in this episode over how harsh Zephyr's family needs to be with him versus how much they want to say. On one hand, if they keep letting him do whatever he wants to, he will never do anything because he doesn't want to. But if they push back too hard, then they're unhappy, as any parent wants to support their child. The key is that a parent should provide their kid with enough to do anything, but not so much they can do nothing. Spice up your life. The main six, I guess main seven, get the Cutie map working again, and it immediately tells Rarity and Pinkie Pie to go to Canterlot on a quest. Once there, Rarity shows her friend the various restaurants based on the 3 hooves system, being reviewed by Zesty Gourmand according to her tastes. Pinkie is unsatisfied with the minimalist food and decor, trying to find something more flavorful when she encounters the Tasty Treat, an Indian hole-in-the-wall restaurant. Or I guess whatever the equivalent of India is in Equestria. I can't think of a decent pun, so I guess the writers didn't either. This restaurant is failing due to the fact that Zesty Gourmand refuses to review it because it doesn't already have customers, but customers won't eat there because it hasn't yet been reviewed. So Rarity uses her sway in Canterlot to convince the critic to eat there, with Pinkie Pie teaming up with Saffron to attract a crowd as Rarity works with Coriander to renovate the insides to be more to Zesty's tastes. Pinkie and Saffron are shocked to see the state of the restaurant when they return because it's now lost its sense of identity, fighting with her father over whether to keep things as they were before or to better comply with the standards that make other restaurants popular. It's a dilemma where both sides have a point. Rarity saw a failing restaurant and did what she could to make it more popular with the Canterlot crowd. But Pinkie valued the original flavors and thought it was merely a matter of spreading the word, despite the originality being the thing stopping people from eating there. In the end, Zesty claims the restaurant isn't up to her standards and refuses to give it any hooves. Yet the grand reopening still attracted tourists seeking something unique, saving the business in spite of Zesty's lack of approval. Because the real role of a critic is not to shape culture, but describe it. A good reviewer doesn't make demands, they simply outline what it is they prefer, and then put their reviews out there with the hopes the audience will do the effort of aligning their reading with a specific reviewer's preferences. If a restaurant critic or a movie critic or a YouTuber talking about TV shows gives a poor review to a work, the audience should not take that as objective truth, but rather a measurement of one person's opinions that happen to be articulated professionally. If you disagree with a critic, that isn't a problem with you, it just means you need to find a critic with similar tastes to yours and to follow their review trail more closely. Stranger than fan fiction. At a Daring Do convention, Rainbow Dash meets Quibblepants, a fellow fan of the Adventurer series. Despite having a lot in common, they begin to feud over whether the series has fallen off in quality in recent entries. Quibble argues that the later books have too much action and not enough puzzle solving, as well as the action itself being unrealistic, something Dash has a problem with as she personally knows all those adventures really happened, but she can't say why. This checks out as far as fandom wars go. The more people have in common, the more vehemently they argue over the tiny differences in what they love. It's like people can like things you like, but for the wrong reasons. When people define their personalities by their fandom, they can get defensive about different opinions, because a person claiming to like one book over another is a bit like a person claiming that their personality is better. Dr. Caballeron, Daring Do's nemesis, then kidnaps Rainbow Dash and Quibblepants, with plans to hold them hostage to lure out Daring Do and a key she possesses. Quibble is convinced that this is just an act paid for by Rainbow to try to prove a point, and all the villains are just actors. As the bad guys tie them up with predictable puzzles and fall for basic tricks, he's only more convinced the entire thing defies reality. This stops when they get dragged into a hidden temple where they proceed to go through the whole adventure story to retrieve an artifact and save the day. Daring Do even struggles with a puzzle that Patton Oswalt manages to solve faster, as if to drive home that his complaints about the direction the books have taken has some basis in the reality they're based on. He does come around in the end after meeting Daring Do in person and realizing the same truth that Dash had to keep a secret before, that if the books are cliché, it's because real life is too. Like with Flutter Brutter, I'm sort of inclined to say that this is another episode where the creators are not so subtly poking at the fandom, as if to say that the fans complaining about the later seasons are wrong to do so. I'm more inclined this time to say that this was intentional, mostly because the end of the episode has the two of them make up and agree to disagree, that, as huge Daring Do fans, they still have more in common than they have different. The cart before the ponies. The Applewood Derby is coming up, with the school ponies being asked to create a cart to race in an attempt to win one of 3 categories: most traditional, fastest, and most creative. Scootaloo, already being one of the fastest, wants to win most creative, though Rainbow Dash insists on upholding her reputation as fastest in spite of this. Applebloom wants to be the fastest, but Applejack insists she uphold the family's legacy because they're the ones providing the Applewood. And Sweetie Belle wants to win most traditional, but Rarity insists on flexing her creative muscles because she is still upset over getting second place back when she participated. The CMCs begrudgingly go along with what their older siblings want, as they assume that the more experienced ponies know better. After a montage of their suggestions being shut down, the race begins with the fillies upset that, in addition to having no input on the carts themselves, they aren't even allowed to drive. The race begins, though between Rarity's design blocking the road, Applejack's being too slow, and Rainbow Dash's falling apart, there's a massive pile-up in the middle of what's honestly a very poorly designed track. Like, of course they're going to crash when the carts all cross the same intersection that many times. In the end, the adults realize that they got a little bit too obsessive with their designs, deferring to the younger ponies as the competition was supposed to be for their sakes in the first place. Importantly, this episode doesn't actually show who won what category because that isn't the point. The older ponies were so obsessed with winning the competition, they forgot the actual goal of the Applewood Derby, or any competition for children for that matter. Everybody involved is supposed to have fun in an event where they get to spend time with family. The actual competition is just an excuse to get everyone together, so they don't just phone it in as the kids are playing with power tools. 28 pranks later. Apparently, Rainbow Dash has forgotten the first season lesson not to prank Fluttershy, as the episode opens on her being spooked by Dash in the woods. The other ponies confront her about this, reiterating the moral from that story. A good prank is one where both the pranker and prankee are laughing afterwards. But Rainbow Dash takes the wrong lesson from this lecture. They say pranking Fluttershy is too easy, so Dash begins to put more effort into her pranks instead of more effort into selecting victims. After going on an elaborate pranking spree across Ponyville, the Ponyvillians meet up with Pinkie Pie to convince her to convince Rainbow Dash to stop. Pinkie Pie's apprehensive at first, but when she learns of Dash's newest prank to swap out the Filly Guide cookies with cookies that will dye one's mouth rainbow-colored, she changes her mind. The next day, after helping to deliver all the cookies alone because Pinkie was sick with rainbow mouth, Rainbow Dash excitedly waits for all the ponies to notice the prank. But she only hears a silent village, investigating to find cookie-crazed ponies, chasing her and the fillies down for more cookies. Dash and a few of the survivors, language I'm using because of the clear zombie movie references made through the second half of the episode, hole up inside of a barn where they are eventually surrounded. And then everybody wipes the rainbow dye off their mouths and reveals it was just a prank, one done as revenge for her pranking spree before. Essentially, this is just the plot for the mysterious Mare-do-Well, but on a larger scale. Every pony gets together to trick Rainbow Dash to teach her a lesson, this one about pranking despite the fact that, ostensibly, she's learned it before. Maybe Rainbow Dash just thought that, after saving the world half a dozen times, Fluttershy might be a bit more resilient. But she never really says much, so we have to assume she's just forgotten that moral for the sake of plot. The times they are a changeling. Starlight and Twilight are headed to the Crystal Empire to visit Flurry Hearth, the royal baby. Spike comes along incognito, as he doesn't want to attract too much attention with his celebrity status, but when they arrive in an empty city and he removes his disguise, he is swarmed by terrified citizens, warning of a changeling that's been spotted nearby. After confirming that the guests are all real, the royal guard heads out with Spike to search for this changeling, when Spike, left alone, falls into a ravine and discovers the monster hiding in a cave. Except this monster saves his life, introducing himself as Thorax and admitting he isn't like the other changelings because he doesn't want to take love by force like they do. Spike says he'll advocate on Thorax's behalf to encourage the others to accept him, but they assume it's a joke. The ponies of the Crystal Empire are slow to accept not outsiders, but specifically changeling outsiders. Sure, the morals of the show tend to be about accepting every pony, but after a long war and the royal family being torn apart, this sort of acceptance is a slow process. Spike attempts to speed the process along by having Thorax disguise himself as a pony, with Spike vouching for him with a lie they're pen pals from the Equestria Games. The rest of the Crystal Empire accepts this new pony, until he gets to see Flurry Hearth up close and, overwhelmed by the love, he shifts back to his true form. Thorax asks Spike to stand up for him, but Spike doesn't and the changeling is chased out. But Spike feels bad about this, tracking his friend down not just to apologize but to try again. He introduces Thorax to the rest of the court and then uses his celebrity status to force them to give Thorax a chance with a song. The song's lyrics are interesting in that they at once apply to the ponies he's talking to, while also being about Thorax, and also about himself being sung to Thorax. He is asking for a second chance for everybody involved, the changeling wanting to prove he's different and kinder than the rest, Spike asking for a second chance where he won't abandon a new friend, and the Crystal Empire ponies for not chasing away someone who wants to spend time with them. The moral being that it's not just enough to have celebrity status. Anybody with the ability to make a positive change in the world who refuses to do so is effectively reinforcing the harm. In other words, with great power comes great responsibility. Dungeons and Discords. The main 6 are going to Yakistan on a goodwill trip, with Discord begging Fluttershy to take him along. She suggests that he spend time in Ponyville with Spike and Big Mac for their Guys Night, a prospect that he's hesitant to do at first, only to begrudgingly go along. When they arrive at Twilight's castle after sundown, Discord's ready for a rowdy night of revelry, only to learn that they're playing Dungeons and Ogres and Obolettes instead. I think Hasbro owns both, so I don't know why they couldn't use it. Discord is bored by this game, with his boredom turning into rage when he keeps failing skill checks his character isn't built for, being laughed at by imaginary guards. He tries to use his magic to transport the other guys around for different plans, but they insist on playing the game like they planned. So Discord transports them into the game, a prospect they enjoy at first, until they start getting overwhelmed by cardboard enemies. Spike finally says the real reason they invited Discord to play with them. They felt sorry for him because he didn't have any other friends. Discord leaves in shame until Spike invites him back for another chance, this time still using Discord's magic to bring the game to life, just in a little bit less of a literal way. The ponies return in the middle of Guys Night to see them role-playing, with Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie joining in. Buckball Season. Rainbow Dash and Applejack are preparing for a big Buckball game against Appaloosa's team, Buckball being a game that's sort of like Magic Basketball, but with a unicorn as a reverse goalkeeper, an Earth Pony as a shooter, and a Pegasus as a regular goalkeeper. They hold auditions to see who their unicorn will be, only for Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy to show surprising aptitude. What's also surprising is that they find a Pegasus in Snails, who was nonchalantly carrying water when he caught a few stray balls. With the team of 3 now selected, Rainbow Dash and Applejack start training their counterparts while emphasizing how important it is they try their best because all of Ponyville is counting on them. But Fluttershy and Pinkie Pie completely fail at this training, much to the disappointment of their coaches. On the train ride to Appaloosa, they realize why. They put so much pressure on their team they've become nervous. Applejack and Rainbow Dash are the more overtly competitive of the main cast, and they thrive under pressure. But their friends, the girlier Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy, only performed well when there were no stakes. Much like Snails, who teaches them that he never gave in to pressure because he never thought to be worried. Rainbow Dash and Applejack do a warm-up game against the other team under the guise of practicing to take back their role, but when the other ponies perform well in the practice game, they reveal the lesson to the others, showing how they can play well again once they free their mind of the anxieties of trying so hard to win. In the end, the game against Appaloosa winds up as a victory for the Ponyville team, as Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, and Snails don't care about winning and just having fun. It's a little bit disappointing that the episode shows them winning in the end, especially when the entire moral of the episode thus far was that winning or losing doesn't matter. I only point this out because a similar episode, The Cart Before the Ponies, had a similar lesson, with a different ending reinforcing their moral. Viva Las Pegasus. Applejack and Fluttershy are sent by the friendship map to the noisy party city of Las Pegasus, despite it not being either of their types of scene. They enter the hotel belonging to one Gladmane, who speaks like an Elvis impersonator, and he happily invites them in as friends of his, as he claims that the reason this hotel is so nice is because he treats all of his guests and employees as close friends. Applejack is shocked to see the Flim Flam brothers not only working in the casino, but arguing with one another as they used to be so close. Not wanting her mission to involve those two, Applejack begins to look for some pony else to help, as Fluttershy interviews the brothers, not only learning about the things they believe about one another, but also asking the performing animals nearby for the truth, discovering with Applejack, all the performing duos are fighting among themselves, as Gladmane has been turning them against each other behind their backs. The reason he's able to get away with this is due to his perception among the ponies of Las Pegasus as a kind and generous man. He uses the goodwill from his reputation to make false claims, with ponies assuming he has their best interest in mind because, as far as they know, that's true. People are more likely to believe a person when they have a reputation for this sort of thing, even if that reputation doesn't match up with any reality. A similar lesson came from an earlier episode, The Times They Are a Changeling, where Spike used his reputation as the savior of the Crystal Empire to help out Thorax. Here we see the same dynamic used for bad instead of good. But while Gladmane's reputation let him exploit the other ponies, Applejack's reputation for honesty is what convinced the Flim Flam brothers to put aside their differences and work to catch Gladmane in the act. At first they disguise Fluttershy as impossibly rich, a wealthy pony looking to compete against Gladmane. He sees through the disguise and refuses to give up his secret, but when he gloats about it afterwards, they broadcast this gloating to the entire casino, ruining his financial empire as all of his performers realize they would be better off elsewhere. The Flim Flam brothers end up taking over the casino in Gladmane's absence, much to Applejack's annoyance because they didn't learn a thing. Every little thing she does. Starlight Glimmer is showing off her newly learned magical abilities with Twilight, even creating new spells that are nearly better than what her teacher can do. But what she struggles with are the friendship lessons, which she has been putting off for the last season, pretending she's learning about friendship instead. As Twilight's leaving to give a lecture, she gives Starlight 5 friendship lessons to spend time with the rest of the main 6, something she is nervously unprepared for. Starlight Glimmer calls over the other ponies into the castle and tries to get the lessons over with as fast as possible, baking a cake with Pinkie Pie, sewing a dress with Rarity, scrapbooking with Applejack, taming animals with Fluttershy, and chillaxing with Rainbow Dash. As each of the ponies has their own way of doing things, she casts a spell to make them more agreeable, which turns them into mindless versions of themselves that agree with whatever Starlight says, like a sycophantic LLM. They end up performing exactly the tasks they are told to, but because Starlight isn't specific enough, these wind up chaotic because Pinkie Pie follows the entire recipe book instead of just the recipe, Rarity keeps trying to make a bigger dress using all the fabric in the castle, Applejack won't stop summarizing every single picture, Fluttershy tames all the animals in the castle, and Rainbow Dash ends up flooding the castle in an attempt to put out the fire because Starlight didn't extinguish one. Twilight returns to see the chaos of the castle, with Starlight admitting she doesn't really know what she's doing when it comes to making friends. Her idea was misguided as she was trying to clear the tasks Twilight left for her rather than actually spend time with the ponies associated with these tasks. She ends up apologizing and trying to make things up to those that she mind-controlled, ultimately going through with the original lessons despite being very bad at them. It's then that she learns the lesson. Friendship isn't about what you do, but who you do it with. And this is a lesson that the others have all learned before, just implemented in a new way. The purpose of Starlight as a character is that she is new to the idea of friendship, much in the same way that Discord was in seasons past and arguably still is now. Having the main 6 make the same friendship mistakes over and over again would allow for more episodes, but after a while every lesson learned means far less when you realize they won't remember it. Starlight being added to the cast late allows for the showrunners to touch on older plot lines without it looking like the characters are growing in reverse for the sake of the plot. Pony Point of View. Applejack, Pinkie Pie, and Rarity have recently returned from a boat trip meant to take them out of their elements. But when Twilight meets them at the station, they're all disheveled and they refuse to talk to one another. Wanting to know why they're all so angry, Twilight and Spike interview each of the 3 ponies to hear what happened. Rarity explains that she intended to show the others an elegant cruise with snacks, but Applejack's piratey obsessions and Pinkie Pie's lollygagging drove him off course. After they knock the snacks into the water, a tidal wave approaches and they're too busy fighting over the map to get out of the way, crashing the ship. Realizing there are gaps in the story, Twilight seeks out Pinkie Pie, and she tells a different story. Pinkie wanted to turn the trip into a party vote, but Rarity's insistence on being fashionable distracted them from her games. After a piñata game gone wrong, they wind up off course, veering into a tidal wave. Next, they ask Applejack for the truth, and she tells him about a piratey adventure she planned for the others. But Pinkie Pie spent too much time messing around, and Rarity was too stuck up to help, with their games colliding as a blindfolded Applejack struggled to keep them on course. Twilight realizes that all 3 ponies are telling the truth selectively, each one telling the same story but putting focuses on what they personally noticed about the others through a biased lens. This is the core idea behind a Rashomon-type story, that the truth is different to each person as what each one considers to be the truth will be different from every other pony's idea of the truth. This is because people tend to stop looking for something once they think they've found it, but continuing to look for facts after you think you have them all is the basic foundation of scientific discovery. After all, everybody knew that the sun revolved around the Earth until people started double-checking it. Twilight realizes that the 3 ponies aboard the ship did this exact thing. Each one boarded the ship with a different idea in mind for how it would go, and based all of their interactions on whether they supported that idea. Pinkie and Rarity both looked at the fact that the snacks went overboard, but didn't care why because they stopped looking. Applejack's story explained how the snacks were thrown overboard, by accident, but she also stopped thinking about this incident instead of continuing to check to see the effect it had on the others, which is how they all missed the sea monster that the food attracted. This was kind of a cop-out ending. I would have preferred if the three of them were all equally guilty of crashing the ship and simply didn't put their own fault into the equation. Where the Apple Lies. After Apple Bloom is caught lying about a delivery to look better, she's compared to the usually honest Applejack, who it turns out has not always been that way. The episode flashes back to Big Mac and Applejack in their younger years, arguing over who's going to take over the farm, Big Mac's strength or Applejack's brains. Applejack gets the idea to expand the business by selling their cider to filthy rich, but Granny Smith shoots down the idea as the cider has to be served fresh, punishing Applejack by making her call off the deal. Worried this will hurt her reputation with a client, Applejack makes up a lie by calling off the deal with claims Granny is sick. This works for a while until the rich family tries to offer their condolences and flowers to Granny. As it turns out, Filthy also recognizes the importance of maintaining good personal relationships with those with whom you work, so Applejack has Big Mac stall for her while she tries to hide Granny from the others, eventually saying she's recovering in the hospital. The two ponies then try to stop the Riches from learning the truth at the hospital by tricking Granny into giving a speech about apple blight while donning a gown and face mask. Big Mac is set to play the role of Granny by hiding under the covers as Applejack tries to corral so many of her lies at once. Eventually she admits the truth to stop Granny from amputating a limb she believes is infected, and the episode cuts back to the present, where Apple Bloom has learned the lesson that people with positive traits like honesty aren't born that way, but learn to become better ponies. Top Bolt. Twilight and Dash are called to the Wonderbolt's Academy for a friendship emergency, though all they see are a few new recruits who don't seem to have much wrong with them. That is until Dash notices one of the haughtiest students, Sky Stinger, isn't actually a great flyer, but is being supported by the wings of the meek Vapor Trail. Sky is unaware of this as he assumes he's naturally talented, and he wants Vapor to succeed alongside him as he thinks that she is the weak flyer of the two. Twilight and Dash both have differing opinions on how to deal with the issue, with Twilight wanting them to be honest with each other, while Dash thinks that the honesty might ruin their chances of making it in the solo trials due to how mental flying is. So they attempt to give the duo some one-on-one training under the guise of the two students' cover stories, that Vapor Trail is getting tutored on the advanced stuff, while Sky Stinger is being re-taught the basics. But because Sky is so overconfident, he doesn't take his lessons seriously and learns nothing. Then Vapor is the one to admit that she's been boosting him all along. As Rainbow Dash suspected, this discovery breaks his confidence and he fails to perform even basic maneuvers. Worse is that he and Vapor are no longer on speaking terms, so they won't even practice together. At least until Rainbow Dash and Twilight get the two of them together to talk it out, where they almost immediately make up. Both of them were concerned for each other from the start, so it's not really an abrupt ending. One of the advantages of the friendship map system from a writing standpoint is that it introduces new ponies into each plotline. Having the main six be the focus of every episode would result in a lot of retreading their same ground, meaning that an ending such as this one would be cliché and predictable. We already know the main six are friends, so ending the episode on the status quo would be boring rather than the relief it's meant to be. To Where and Back Again. A letter arrives from Starlight Glimmer inviting her back to the village she is from for a festival. She has a nightmare that night about all her old pony acquaintances hating her and telling her off for trying to show up. Luna talks to her, saying that although it is just a dream, the fear behind it is real and she ought to talk to her friends about it. Her friends suggest bringing a friend to the village for emotional support, and she chooses Trixie. But when the two of them arrive in the village, what actually happens is far worse than any nightmare. The other ponies want to put her in charge of the activities around the festival. Starlight has a panic attack and Trixie covers for her, the two escaping with magic to return home that evening. Here she tries to tell her friends about how disastrously the event went, seeking further emotional support, but the rest of the main six are acting strange and avoidant, like Twilight saying she ought to cut her losses and cut the village out of her life. That night, she has another nightmare about the village that's interrupted again by Luna. This time it's Luna who needs help, as she says that she and the other princesses have all been kidnapped by the Changelings. Starlight Glimmer warns Trixie about this, and they meet up with Thorax, who warns him that the Crystal Empire has been taken over as well. After they confirm the rest of the princesses are taken, they meet with Discord, who uses his magic to teleport them closer to Fluttershy's location, because he's furious she's been taken. Once outside the Changeling hive, they wonder what to do next, all of them turning to Starlight despite the fact that she does not want to be put in charge. Thorax explains that the inside of the hive has an anti-magic barrier around it, powered by Chrysalis's throne, meaning that they have to sneak in and destroy it without the use of their magic. Thorax leads the way through the constantly changing hallways as Discord and Trixie begin to argue, but Starlight's able to put herself in the middle of the conflict to get them to focus. After a while, they are swarmed by Changeling drones, with Trixie able to delay them with her illusions and a few smoke bombs, only to end up lost afterwards. But Starlight realizes that some of the Changelings are headed to the throne room, and with the help of a distraction by Discord, they make their way deeper into the hive. Discord's distracted by multiple illusions of Fluttershy and fails to rejoin the others, though a Changeling disguised as him does take his place. They realize he's a fake, and Trixie pretends to fall for it to distract an upcoming ambush, while Starlight and Thorax make their way to the throne room. Starlight, actually Thorax in disguise, is caught by Chrysalis, with her monologue serving as a distraction as Starlight hacks away at the throne. But she's caught before she can finish the job, and is soon going to join the rest of the powerful ponies in pods, replaced by Changelings who farm love from the adoration the others get. But Starlight Glimmer points out Thorax's new form as proof that there is a better way to harvest love, that the Changelings can give it to each other, and they don't have to steal or trick their way into feeding. Thorax is able to share his love with Chrysalis and the others, overpowering her magic and shapeshifting the rest of the hive into new marketable forms. Chrysalis tries to lash out in spite of the change, but the rest of the Changelings, no longer starving for affection, reject her commands, and the former queen runs away, refusing to be reformed with the others. Starlight Glimmer is the main character of this season finale, just as she was the main character of the season's premiere. Back then, her role in the story was accepting her place as one of the main cast, playing a small role in the actual rescue of the Crystal Empire, as she mostly encouraged the others to be in the places they had to save the day. Here, she is the central character, the one who incites the incidents to save the day after Equestria has been taken over off-screen. There are even a few parallels to past plots, like how Tyrek didn't know there was a fourth princess he had to capture, while here, the Changeling armies are unaware they needed to capture and impersonate a seventh member of the main six. And why would they? They feed off of love and would have been able to locate her if she was getting plenty of it from her former friends. She just didn't accept any of that love because she ran from their attempts to get closer. Starlight's arc of redemption completes itself here as she becomes redeemed not in the eyes of those around her, but in her own. She even admits that she wasn't sure if she deserved to have a position of power because she thought she might abuse it, much in the same way that she avoided friendship lessons before as she thought that she would fail. Here, she's avoiding power or any of the trappings of it, similarly to how she used to live. If she avoids the temptation, then she never has to learn for real if she has changed. She can live in denial forever. But she gets to take on a leadership position in this episode and still manages to not only succeed, but to teach a lesson about friendship to the Changelings at the climax of the episode, proving that she can not only lead others, but to do it in a good way. A true redemption arc is not just changing a character such that they can never do harm again, but putting them in a position where they could inflict harm if they chose to do so, and then have them choose not to do so. Chrysalis refused the offer to feed off of the love of her subjects, preferring the kidnapping and sabotage that she's been doing while the rest of the cast learns to accept their flaws as things that have happened, but only in the past. Celestial Advice. Starlight Glimmer and the rest of her group are being recognized for a celebration of their heroics in not only fighting off Queen Chrysalis's invasion at the end of last season, but the formation of a new Changeling kingdom and an era of peace. Twilight's excited to honor her new student at this party, until Discord begins to point out that her student is beginning to surpass the need for a mentor. Twilight asks Celestia what to do as her friendship lessons are becoming unnecessary, and realizes an uncomfortable truth. It's time to repeat the student-mentor cycle between her and Celestia by sending away her pupil. Twilight uses her magic to model a few scenarios about what might happen to her student in various new locations, all of which result in an imaginary disaster, as Twilight slowly copes with the fact that she's too worried about Starlight's safety to spend any time apart. That is until Celestia points out that she had the exact same worry about sending her star student, Twilight, away to Ponyville. This whole conversation recontextualizes the relationship between Twilight and Celestia, the latter of whom has appeared as a perfect, incomparable monolith of perfection and stoic learning. As it turns out, Celestia is not perfect. She has the same worries that any pony else might have. She simply hid her negative feelings to give Twilight more confidence. If Celestia had visibly worried about letting Twilight Sparkle study independently, maybe Twilight would have given up more easily because even her teacher isn't confident she'll be successful. Twilight returns to the party where Discords made a big deal of her impending announcement, that her student is going to be sent away for independent study. But Starlight confesses that she doesn't think she's ready, much to Twilight's relief as she embraces her former student before unveiling a new gift of a mirror. All bottled up. Starlight and her friend Trixie are left alone in the castle to practice magic, though Trixie is not taking the lessons seriously because she's spending more time on vanity projects than work. Starlight gets visibly angry with smoke coming out of her horn she uses magic to dissipate. As she explains to Spike, her magic is based off of her emotional state. The stronger her emotions are, the stronger her magic is. This is why she was able to outdo Twilight before. Starlight was so angry she overpowered Twilight's years of experience. While practicing a teleportation spell together, Trixie accidentally misfires and teleports the friendship map away, and she can't remember where she put it. Too angry to dissipate her anger anymore, Starlight begins to literally bottle the emotion away as she and her friend head out to look for this table by going through Trixie's thought process before she casts the spell. This mostly consists of visiting various stores and doing shopping as Trixie keeps getting distracted, and when she notices Starlight's anger bottle glowing, they fight over it and then the bottle breaks. Starlight's obviously in the wrong in this episode for bottling up her emotions and not being open or honest with her friend, and yet her motivations for doing so are easy to understand. Getting mad at your friends and yelling at them is not a very friendly thing to do, even if it is honestly how you feel. There's a difference between being nice and acting nice, where the nicest thing to do to somebody might be to let them know that they're doing something wrong, even if you do need to be a bit firm to get the point across. This unleashes all of Starlight's rage, which infects the ponies they've been shopping from, and they all begin to shout the things Starlight's been thinking at Trixie as they surround her. Starlight tries to undo the spell with her magic, but finds herself unable to cast anything due to exhaustion. Eventually she gives in and admits her anger to Trixie, apologizing for not speaking up about her friend's annoying habits earlier. Trixie also apologizes, as she didn't realize her affectations were considered annoying instead of cute. With their friendship repaired, Starlight and Trixie are able to fix everything, because it turns out that not only is the tagline of the show true, but its inverse is as well. Friendship is magic, but magic is friendship too. A Flurry of Emotions. Shining Armor and Cadence need a day off to visit a friend's art exhibit, and they ask Twilight if it's okay that she watch her niece Flurry Heart for a day. Twilight agrees in spite of Spike's warnings their schedule is too packed to babysit, as she wants to be the best aunt ever. She spends too much time playing around with Flurry and ends up behind schedule, trying to bring the baby along on all the chores in anticipation of a visit to some children at the hospital. But Flurry Heart dislikes when Twilight tries to split her attention, causing mayhem at the toy store, cake store, and the library anytime she's out of Twilight's sight. Twi and Spike end up having to stay late to clean up the messes, eventually getting to the hospital in a rush when Flurry once again tears up the building searching for a doll. Twilight finally snaps at Flurry Heart for being such a pain, only to realize that the baby is, well, a baby. It's silly to try to take out anger on an infant who can't know any better, as the fault lies on Twilight herself. Not because she failed to watch after Flurry, she was trying her best, but because she agreed to watch the baby despite knowing she couldn't pay enough attention to her. It's not like she had bad intentions, she just prioritized helping out more than things like whether she was capable of doing so. Sometimes the nicest thing you can do for someone is to give them an honest, "I'd love to, but I can't." Rock-solid friendship. Maud Pie has graduated with a rock doctorate, and is trying to choose between moving to Ghastly Gorge, well, there'll be a lot of rocks, or Ponyville, with fewer rocks but other ponies. Pinkie Pie wants her sister nearby, and attempts to show off all the good Ponyville has to offer. But the rocks in the village are things Maud has seen before, and Pinkie Pie fails to sell her sister on the idea of living near. So she pivots strategies to convince Maud to live in Ponyville by making her a new friend from Starlight Glimmer. After a brief flashback revealing that apparently Maud was the one to help Starlight take over Equality Village, the two begin to grow closer as friends, sharing Starlight's love of flying kites and Maud's love of rocks. But Pinkie Pie keeps getting in the way of all their bonding activities, even turning their discovery of a secretive cavern into a bonding exercise they quickly navigate away from. Pinkie Pie's behavior here is incredibly out of character. She at once cares a lot about her sister to the point of trying to manipulate her into friendships to stick around, but then she contradicts this love of her sister by failing to recognize when she actually does make a friend. Pinkie Pie gets what she wants as Maud and Starlight grow closer, but apparently has forgotten enough about her sister she's now failing to recognize the signs of this affection. Maud leaves a note for Pinkie Pie announcing her decision to leave Ponyville and work with Rocks instead. When Pinkie Pie tries to warn Starlight about this, Starlight says it's pretty understandable that would happen, because Pinkie Pie scared her sister away by refusing to give her space. Pinkie then rushes to Ghastly Gorge to find her sister, nearly being eaten by a giant eel, as Maud finally admits that she does want to open up to some pony and moves back. Not quite to Ponyville, but the cavern she and Starlight found before. Fluttershy Leans In. When Angel's leg is hurt in a parkour accident, Fluttershy takes him to the vet, only to see Fauna, the veterinarian, is struggling to deal with her crowded workspace due to how many animals are there. So Fluttershy offers to build an animal sanctuary to make her job easier, calling over some friends to help out, which they do by putting Fluttershy in contact with a few of their friends from various construction jobs. Fluttershy unveils her plans for this sanctuary, but these are less blueprints and more of a dream board, something the experts called in can't really read. So they ignore Fluttershy's requests to add in their own ideas, but Fluttershy warns them that these ideas won't work as they aren't right for the animals. Predictably, the sanctuary winds up being a bad fit when Fauna comes to visit with them and the entire incomplete structure collapses. So Fluttershy decides to rebuild, this time being more specific about what she wants while only hiring outside help she can trust, like one of the Macolts. This new sanctuary is perfect for the animals who happily live there instead of inside of the cramped vet's office. It's a weird moral, though. This episode's plot is effectively the Season 1 episode, Suited for Success, where Rarity tried to meet the demands of various clients who didn't know what they wanted. It's just told from the point of view of the client instead of the designer. Fluttershy's design for the sanctuary was not much of a design, and the vagueness was interpreted by the experts brought in the way that they would typically make something. The mistakes that they made were from a lack of information about the client's needs. So Fluttershy could have been more specific or tried to micromanage a bit better, but the experts are unlikely to try to listen to someone with less experience in what they do. The ideal solution is to find a middle ground between what the client wants and what the client needs, but it's impossible to reach such a compromise if you don't at least advocate for your position. And Fluttershy's whole character is that she frequently is too shy to advocate for herself. This episode represents a degree of character growth in that she eventually told off the contractors and made more demands of them. But because she's inexperienced with actually making these demands, she overcorrected and came on too strong. The moral is hurt a little bit by having everything turn out fine with just Fluttershy in charge, but that's likely an affordance for the fictional animals. Forever Philly. While setting up for the spring fashion season, Rarity realizes that she hasn't spent time with her little sister in too long, and decides to spend the entire day with Sweetie Belle to make up for this lost time. The Cutie Mark Crusaders are in the middle of meeting with a client, Zipperwill, and her unaffectionate puppy, Ripley, when Rarity bursts in to take her sister along on a tour of everything. This tour consists of tiny plates of ice cream, puppet shows, and several other activities that Sweetie Belle has aged out of long ago. But she doesn't say anything because she just wants to spend time with her sister. Meanwhile, the CMCs are struggling to get Ripley to pay attention to his owner at all, as he is uninterested in anything they try to do together. Eventually, Sweetie Belle sees what's going on and connects it to her struggle. All of Zipperwill's activities are appropriate for a puppy, not a full-grown dog. Rarity overhears this conversation and realizes she is doing the same thing, trying to get her little sister to do childish things instead of acknowledging she's grown up. It's not like she had bad intentions in this episode. She was just nostalgic over all the good times they had had together and didn't realize that the last time they got to play was the last time they got to play. Sure, a good older sister would want to see Sweetie Belle grow older, but growing up is different because it means she's losing something too. In the end, Sweetie Belle realizes that she snapped at her older sister seemingly out of nowhere because she hadn't implied up to that point she wasn't enjoying their time together. It's difficult to tell some pony off when they're trying to help you. Rarity and Sweetie Belle both wanted to spend time with one another, and that's what they did. They simply struggle to find that line where you can appreciate a person's effort while still rejecting those efforts. Parental Glideance. Scootaloo is doing a report on a pony that inspires her, Rainbow Dash, and she has the Crusaders launch her into Cloudsdale to do research. There she meets Bo Hothoof and Wendy Whistles, Rainbow Dash's parents, and when she tells them of her report, they're excited to meet some pony who is as much a fan of Dash as they are. They give Scootaloo a tour of Dash's old room, as well as all the trophies she's ever won, including trophies for things like walking and eating. And then Scootaloo reveals that Rainbow Dash is a Wonderbolt, something Bo and Wendy didn't know. They follow Scootaloo to a Wonderbolts practice where they not only cheer louder than every pony else, but even shoot fireworks in an excessive display. When they follow her into the locker room, Rainbow Dash finally snaps at them for being too supportive, breaking their hearts. Later on, Rainbow Dash explains her real annoyance. She was a poor athlete before, but her parents cheered her on no matter what, even as she worked her way up the ranks and eventually became one of the best. The problem is that her parents supported her regardless of what she actually did, meaning that the cheering for last place was the same as the cheering for first. While they had the best of intentions, the reality is that it made Rainbow Dash feel less accomplished because they would have cheered for anything. This is an issue with telling kids they're very talented. Talent refers to something a pony is born with, a thing intrinsic to them, and if you're born with it, that's it. You can't improve talent, and praising effort regardless of how little effort there is means there's no reason to give any effort. Why bother to earn something you would have gotten anyway? But this over-celebration is then compared to Scootaloo's parents, or lack of them. She never had any pony to cheer her on, regardless of what she did. It's seeing what happens on the opposite extreme that finally makes Rainbow Dash appreciate her parents for their efforts instead of the reality of the praise. While the constant celebration was annoying, the complete lack of acknowledgement would be far worse. It's a bit jarring that the moral of this episode was that Rainbow Dash should appreciate her parents because it could have been a lot worse instead of them realizing that, to be good parents, they need to understand where their kid's coming from. The fact that they didn't even know she accomplished her childhood dream of being a Wonderbolt should have led to at least some introspection. If your kids are keeping secrets from you, it's at least worth trying to understand why. Because what good parent doesn't want to understand their kid? Hard to say anything. The Cutie Mark Crusaders grow suspicious of Big Mac when they see him running an unusually high number of apple shipments to Starlight's old village, which from what I can tell is just called Starlight's Old Village, and they follow him on a trip to find out why. They see his apples are all going to the same overstocked bakery, but they also see that Big Mac keeps making eyes at Sugarbelle, the bakery's owner. Realizing Apple Bloom's brother has a crush, the Cutie Mark Crusaders encourage him to confess his feelings, but another pony named Featherbangs beats him to the punch, showing off his talents and pushing Big Mac aside. But they don't want him to give up, and they tell Big Mac to try a better confession of his feelings by copying the romantic moments from one of Sweetie Belle's fairy tale books. As before, Feather keeps stealing the spotlight from Big Mac, culminating in the two singing competing songs for her attention to mess up her bakery. Sugarbelle kicks them out and Big Mac pouts about this, talking about how she really did have feelings for her, as the CMCs realize that she also likes Big Mac, but not the things he does. Big Mac confesses to her one more time, this time not mimicking another type of confession, but confessing in his own way with an extended display case for her store. Sugarbelle returns his love as Featherbangs admits that he knows how to flirt, but not to hold a proper conversation, to which the CMCs agree to teach him to talk normally instead of acting like Justin Bieber. Honest Apple. Rarity is putting on a fashion show meant to spread the word of up-and-coming artists, inviting many of the greatest designers of Equestria to judge, and also Applejack. Rarity's logic is that Applejack's honesty and logical mind will be an asset to the panel of judges, and after giving a few utilitarian tips to Apple Bloom, Applejack agrees to judge. But Applejack visits the studio as the designers are working on their outfits, unable to follow the conversation the others are having about them and chiming in with criticisms about how impractical the clothes are. Rarity realizes that Applejack's honesty doesn't translate well to fashion advice, but insists on giving her friend another chance to judge, and when a more confident Applejack returns to the studio to start altering the outfits, the contestants and judges all walk out. Applejack doesn't believe she's done anything wrong as she was asked to be honest, and then she was. But there's a difference between honesty and tact. Just because something is true doesn't mean you need to say it out loud. More pronounced is the fact that Applejack is being asked for her opinion on the outfits, and since opinions can differ, calling one opinion more valuable is dishonest. And then there's the difference between being honest and being right. Applejack admitted she knew very little about fashion, and so she missed out on some of the details of what the creators were trying to do. When you call in a fresh pair of eyes, they might offer a unique perspective, but a lot of expertise is just being able to tell when new perspectives are not worth looking into. Rarity finally proves this when she introduces Applejack to Strawberry Sunrise, a pony who loves strawberries but hates apples. When Applejack gets upset at Strawberry's dismissiveness of apples, she realizes that she treated the designers the same way, and attempts to get them all back into the studio. The fashion show goes on, with Applejack being chosen as the final judge, but since she can't decide, she chooses all 3 contestants rather than declaring the tie-breaking vote, a pragmatic choice that Rarity selected her to do. A royal problem. The friendship map sends Starlight Glimmer alone to Canterlot. This terrifies Twilight as she's torn between sending her student alone, as that's what the map wants, versus micromanaging the mission and making it look like she doesn't have faith in the student. So Twilight uses a spell to appear as a music box in Starlight's room, offering advice to her as she spends her time in the castle with the royal sisters, who are fighting, just not publicly. She realizes that Celestia never recognizes any of Luna's efforts because she's too busy with diplomatic meetings and being the face of Equestria, tasks that Luna resents her sister for as she believes these jobs are easy. Trying to confront the sisters about their lack of appreciation, Starlight casts a spell that swaps their cutie marks, and because she can't undo the spell herself, they'll have to wait 24 hours for it to wear off. So Celestia and Luna need to swap jobs for the day, something they're both confident is going to be easy because they believe they have the harder of the 2 jobs normally. Except Luna struggles to do any of these jobs Celestia does, as keeping a smiling royal demeanor is difficult to do, and she winds up terrifying the ponies of Canterlot when she defaults to her resting face. The next morning, Celestia takes over only to quickly realize all the ponies are asleep at night and she has to do everything alone. She enters a few dreams to calm ponies down, only to enter a nightmare of Starlight about the 2 sisters fighting one another, resulting not just in Luna becoming Nightmare Moon again, but Celestia turning into Daybreak, an evil version of herself who wants to rule exclusively. Celestia and Luna need to work together, pulled from Luna's dream of not being good enough, to prevent Daybreak's takeover by telling her she isn't the real Celestia, because the real Celestia does appreciate her sister too much to ever hurt her. Now appreciating one another's jobs more, the sisters return to a level of understanding. Celestia no longer has to pretend to be perfect around her sister, while Luna's given some pony to talk to so she isn't as lonely. Not asking for trouble. Pinkie Pie is invited to Yakistan for their holiday Yak Slurbert Fest, and Twilight sends her there as the official diplomat to the Yakistani Yaks. Yak. She watches him celebrate the holiday by stomping and destroying chunks of wood, as well as several other traditional feasts and so on. Then when their stomping causes an avalanche that buries the city in snow, their plan to dig themselves out takes too long and exhausts them. But the prince refuses to acknowledge that anything is wrong, telling off Pinkie Pie for trying to help the Yaks out of their snow as he pretends that everything's fine and they enjoy being buried. Pinkie tries a few things to convince them that it's alright to ask for help, but the prince is stubborn even while his subjects are freezing. So she returns to Ponyville to tell the other ponies they need to go help, but stealthily so the Yak's pride isn't hurt. The next day, they've magically unburied the town and Rutherford celebrates a win until he sees Pinkie Pie leaving, where he realizes that he probably should have just asked for help all along. It seems like a bit of a muddy moral for this episode, that you should try to infer if your friends need help, even if they never outright ask for it. On one hand, you might not know a person's full story, or if they even need the help, versus if you're just imagining they're struggling. But the real message is a bit clearer if you imagine that Prince Rutherford's actions were not meant to be looked up to. Sometimes an episode isn't trying to present a nuanced depiction of a situation, and you just have to look at the basic facts, something that even Pinkie struggled to do here because she kept looking for reasons why Rutherford and the others were telling the truth when they said they were fine. Sometimes pride comes before a fall, but sometimes pride comes after a fall. Sometimes a town buried in snow needs to be dug out, even if those struggling refuse to admit as such. Discordant Harmony. While having a tea party at Fluttershy's place, Discord realizes that Fluttershy's never had tea at his place. He travels around Ponyville preparing for this party by making everything weird, only to meet Pinkie Pie and ask her for help, where she says he ought to plan the party around things Fluttershy would like. Realizing Fluttershy's normal and he's not, Discord, and Discord redecorate the house to be more normal in time for Fluttershy's arrival. But when she gets there, she is unimpressed by the boring tea party, with this emotion turning into horror when Discord starts to fade to nothingness. So Fluttershy messes up his house to make it more chaotic, not the way she likes it, but the way she was expecting it. Because Fluttershy likes Discord because of his eccentricities and not in spite of them. It's probably the shortest episode description thus far. I don't know. I don't really keep track of the word count. This is because A, this is a moral the show's had before, just with different characters, and B, Discord-focused episodes tend to be about the visual gags and zaniness, two things that do not translate very well into this style of video. The Perfect Pear. Apple Bloom gets a free jar of pear jelly at the market from William Shatner, but her siblings quickly hide it from Granny, saying that pears and apples have been feuding for longer than they can remember. But Apple Bloom asks why, and they don't know, so they all head to Goldie Delicious to hear the full story. She explains that the two families have always feuded as they had adjacent market stands and adjacent farmhouses, bickering over their competition, although in true feud fashion, a simple business rivalry seems too small to be the actual reason. It's more likely they hate each other because they hate each other. The two ponies in these families who do not blindly hate each other are Bright Macintosh, their father, and Pear Butter, also known as Buttercup, their mother. In case the hints weren't obvious enough, this is a repurposing of Romeo and Juliet just with ponies and farms. Goldie Delicious directs them to Burnt Oak, their father's childhood friend, and he tells them about the two growing up. Here they learn that Macintosh had an honest streak similar to Applejack's. Then he directs them to Mrs. Cake, Buttercup's childhood friend, who talks about how she always seemed to know what people were meant for, like Apple Bloom's Crusader work. The story reaches a climax as the two are about to be separated because the Pear family's moving away from their longtime nemesis to keep them apart. So the Apple trio heads to Mayor Mare to hear the rest of the story. She was asked to marry the two in a small secret ceremony, like Big Mac likes, the night before they were set to leave for Van Hoover. Their grandparents, Grandpear and Granny Smith, catch them in the act, and Buttercup is forced to choose between her old family and the new one. She chooses the apples, and Grandpear leaves that morning. Back in the present, they realize that Grandpear was not in Ponyville for business reasons, but to patch things up with his in-laws. They accept his apology and let him in the family, as pears and apples are finally together, even if Buttercup and Bright Macintosh aren't present. Though the episode still ends on a bright note, as they revisit the spot where they were married between the farms to see a pear and apple tree growing together. Fame and Misfortune. Twilight helps two fillies with a friendship problem by quoting her old friendship journal, reminding her it exists. She calls the rest of the main 7 over to show off this old relic, which has aged a lot in about 3 seasons. And after they spend a bit of time reminiscing, she has Starlight Glimmer make copies for each of them, and then makes even more copies so they can spread these friendship lessons to all of Equestria. These books immediately become bestsellers, but not all as great as it seems because the ponies of Equestria become fans of these stories and not the lessons in the stories. Rarity is now unpopular as people who read the journals dislike her outward personality rather than the underlying generosity. They all laugh at everything Pinkie Pie does, regardless of if she's trying to be funny. People begin criticizing Fluttershy because she keeps learning to be assertive over and over, instead of the lesson sticking after one episode. And they all swarm the Apple family farm because they feel like family, but this overruns the actual family with work. People also harass everyone around Rainbow Dash as they reduce her personality to being better than every pony else, and soon, Twilight and the others are all taking shelter inside the castle. And yeah, in the previous paragraph I referred to the fans as everybody instead of every pony. That isn't a mistake, it's a conscious change. This episode was not about the ponies of Equestria, it was about the fandom. It's not just about the main 6, but the showrunners, and the friendship journals are the show itself. There's a concept in media called death of the author that the audience's interpretation of the work is valid no matter what the author meant, as the second someone finishes a work, they no longer have control over it. Effectively, the way you feel about a work is always valid as long as you think it can be supportive. But this runs into obstacles when the fandom is so involved in the perception of, in this case a show, people will hear about My Little Pony well before they watch it. And often a new viewer's first impression of MLP is hearing about some weird thing the fandom did. The thing is, the author isn't dead, at least not in an actively airing season. So the showrunners are able to respond to what the fans are doing and can make episodes to not only address ongoing canon, but the way the canon is interpreted. This isn't meant as a way of saying that certain interpretations are invalid. After all, you can form an idea about a character's personality that's valid for the time you made it, like Fluttershy not being assertive because she wasn't at the start of the show, but a way of nudging opinions in one direction. This is ultimately a fruitless endeavor. People like their theories and will just ignore the text if they are that dedicated to them. Nothing a writer adds to the text can change the opinion of a person who ignores it. The main six sing a song justifying their positions by saying they aren't perfect, but the mob outside ignores it. Who does not ignore it, though, are the two fillies Twilight helped at the start of the episode, the honest fans of the journal, as they read it the way the author wished it would be read. There isn't really a right way to interpret a fictional work, but there are still plenty of wrong ones. Triple Threat. Spike has invited Ember for an official diplomatic meeting that will also help her to learn to better get along with dragons. But as they're setting up, Thorax arrives as Spike remembers he invited the leader of the Changelings too. Worried they might not all get along, Spike tries to make sure the two leaders he is hosting never meet up with one another, all while trying to ensure these meetings go well. He has Twilight distracting Thorax with a library tour as Ember and Starlight are sent to the dining hall, Spike running back and forth between where they are to try to act like a good host. It's a common sitcom plot where someone tries to entertain two different people at once while attempting to act like they're a committed host to both of them, but this time it's complicated by Spike being given diplomatic duties for one of the first time. So he oversells how important his task is and begins to worry that, if he fails, the personalities will clash and there'll be a war between the dragons and changelings. And then the Cutie map starts to glow, ordering Spike to fix a friendship problem in Ponyville, so his attention is now split 3 ways. As he's no longer giving proper attention to any of the others, they begin to suspect they've done something wrong. Ember's aggressive, draconic personality is failing to make her any new friends, and Thorax being too polite means his citizens ignore his orders. Eventually the two meet up with one another as Spike faints because of his failure, and they assume the other leader's responsible. But they both step in to defend Spike, with the misunderstanding being cleared up, and soon they meet up by a lake to discuss their issues together. Thorax learns to be more assertive, as someone who cares about their friends ought to be more open. Ember learns to be less aggressive, as people who are dominated the way dragons tend to act around one another don't especially feel good about it. The friendship problem is solved not by Spike, but by his friends meeting together. Campfire Tales. While on a sibling hiking trip to Winsome Falls, the CMCs and their older siblings, biological or otherwise, stop to camp for the night when they're attacked by a swarm of flying spiders. They shelter in a nearby cave, and since they know they'll be trapped there for a while, pass the time with Campfire Tales. Applejack begins with the tale of Rockhoof, a Nordic pony who is too weak to join the mighty Helm. When a volcano erupts, the Helm evacuates the town, but people there refuse to leave because they want to stay in their homes. So Rockhoof himself starts to dig a trench, only to magically grow many times his size to finish the job in time. Next is Rarity talking about Mistbane, a beautiful pony sent away to study magic. When she hears of her childhood friend Sable Spirit being crowned Empress, she returns to a village devoid of any beauty, as Sable Spirit has taken it all herself due to a beautifying spell that backfired. Mistbane captures her friend and sacrifices her own appearance to bring beauty back to the land, even making her old friend young as well. Finally, Rainbow Dash tells the tale of Flash Magnus, a member of the Cloudsdale Royal Legion who watched some of his comrades get captured by dragons. He volunteers for a mission to fly as a distraction for the dragons using a fireproof shield, luring them away for a rescue of his comrades, who then form a lightning cloud to get the dragons off his tail. The ponies realize they're now trapped in the cave due to a rock barrier Rainbow Dash made for them, so they head deeper into the cavern despite Scootaloo being afraid, just as she was back in Sleepless in Ponyville. But she remembers the story she was told, and soon they arrive through a shortcut to Winsome Falls. Daring Done. Rainbow Dash is shocked to learn that Yearling is announcing her retirement after the next Daring Do book, so she and Pinkie Pie rush to her house to learn why. Yearling explains she found a series of articles from places she frequently visits about the destruction left in her wake. That even though she retrieves magical artifacts, the collateral damage makes her look like the bad guy anyway. Dash and Pinkie tell her she needs to visit Somnambula, one of the places from the article, to set the record straight. But when they arrive, they only confirm what the article said. The people of Somnambula hate Daring Do because she destroyed their businesses, left without paying, and even broke the statue of Somnambula, the hero for whom the town is named. Dash attempts to explain that the artifacts are more valuable than a statue, but the village leader explains the true significance of that statue. Somnambula was a figure from history who helped the people retain hope during a famine caused by an evil sphinx. This sphinx kidnapped the prince, holding him hostage unless she could solve a riddle, then perform a feat of crossing a bridge blindfolded, something she did because she retained her hope. Between this episode and Campfire Tales, the history of Equestria has been expanded upon, that there are a series of legendary figures who helped to shape the culture of the ponies, not simply through their deeds, but the emotions that the deeds inspired. Applejack has a legend about a pony who was faithful and strong. Rarity's story was about a pony with a beautiful heart. Rainbow Dash's heroic tale has a big adventure, and so on, with me repeating the lyrics of the opening theme. My guess is that at some point in the near future, we're going to hear more about Star Swirl the Bearded, because he's an old figure Twilight has always looked up to and she hasn't had a story yet. The rest of the episode then kind of drops the ball as to what was actually being set up, because it turns out that no, Daring Do wasn't actually this careless menace to the villages she visits, but all of the hatred was caused by Dr. Cavalleron, her nemesis, spreading rumors about her to turn the townspeople against their hero. It would have been nicer to see that she really was causing damage to the people in spite of saving the day, that protecting an artifact that protects a village is pointless if you don't also protect the well-being of the people around it. Especially as the episode went through so much to explain how hope with a capital H is what keeps them around the area, and that dashing that hope for a symbol of it misses the point. Anyway, Daring Do comes out of her 10-minute retirement to save Rainbow Dash after she is kidnapped in broad daylight while forgetting she can fly. When they return to the village, they reveal the entire scheme by Cavalleron was just to distract the ponies with anger about Daring Do while he robs them all, and after the truth comes out, they quickly turn against him, driving Daring Do's nemesis out of town as Yearling vows to write again. A Health of Information. While helping Fluttershy retrieve some moss, Zecora falls into a pond where she is sprayed by a flower, developing swamp fever. As there's no known cure for the fever, Fluttershy sets out to find one by recruiting Twilight's help, staying up overnight reading through the library because she feels guilty over getting her friend sick. Fluttershy eventually discovers the legend of one Mystical Mask, a powerful healer from, you guessed it, another ancient pony legend. Specifically, this Mystical Mask is actually the mage Meadowbrook. They set out to find her journals by looking in the last place she was known to be, Hayseed Swamp, where they meet her descendant Cattail, who shows them her library. Reading through this library, they find stories of Meadowbrook diagnosing and curing several cases of swamp fever using honey from flash bees, though there's nothing about how she was able to get the honey from the hive. Fluttershy approaches because she knows she is good with wild animals, but having not slept in days, she just gets stung a lot and collapses, sleeping for several days. I should also mention that Fluttershy herself has also gotten swamp fever, though as a ticking clock element of the story, this is just sort of there, since Zecora's sickness and the guilt Fluttershy felt already served the same purpose. It was more of an Act 2 commercial break twist. Fluttershy wakes up and, now fully rested, has the idea to use Meadowbrook's old mask to calm the bees, because the mask has the same markings as the queen. She takes this honey back to Ponyville where she cures Zecora, who starts to rhyme once again. To change a changeling. Starlight and Trixie are making a surprise visit to the Changeling hive, as some of Thorax's letters have been concerning, like how he keeps mentioning a Molwerf attacking them. But before they can make it any closer, they get captured by a changeling who resembles their old, unreformed form, introduced as Pharynx, Thorax's brother. While the rest of the hive has taken on their new, love-sharing forms, Pharynx has refused to adopt this way of living, preferring the old ways of taking everything by force. His attitude is causing the rest of the hive to lose some of their confidence in Thorax's abilities, as their usually positive attitudes turn nasty whenever he's mentioned. Trixie and Starlight attempt to relate to Pharynx by mentioning that the two of them are reformed villains who found that kindness and the other morals have made their lives better. But Pharynx refuses to listen to these lessons because he doesn't actually want to change. He's happy the way he is, and because the Changeling hive is no longer about deference to authority like a hive mind, they can't force him to improve without giving up their morals. Yet Fairing sticking around is also weathering their kindness because they struggle to tolerate his militaristic tendencies. So Starlight and Trixie prepare to let Thorax know the hard truth, that his responsibility is to the hive and not any individual. They ask him to banish his brother, but before they can, Thorax explains his brother used to look after him and his kindly ways, even when they were all under the authority of Chrysalis. So Starlight agrees to give him one more chance, this time by luring the Mallworth to the hive so Fairings can save the day and prove he still cares for his brother. Fairings, however, has overheard their plan and left on his own, out in the wilderness with this giant beast. They track him down in the middle of a fight, realizing that despite no longer considering himself part of the hive, he's still trying to defend it. The rest of the Changelings eventually join in, though they are out of practice in combat and struggle to do anything. Who's not out of practice is the Mallworth itself, and they use the stop hitting yourself strategy Fairings used to take it out. Once the day is saved, Fairings admits that he still values the hive over his old beliefs, and then he transforms, not into a Changeling the same color as the others, but as their new shape with his original colors. The Changelings accept him as one of their own, in spite of Fairings still having some violent tendencies, because that's what acceptance has to be. You can't just be kind to the people who are easy to be kind to, you need to be kind even to those who are a little difficult to get along with. Your morals aren't defined by the easy things you do, but the challenges. It isn't the main thing about you. Following an incident involving some silly string, Pinkie Pie and Rarity go to Zecora's to get a solution to their main problems. They're each given a bottle of powerful removing agent and a strong shampoo, but the bottles are mixed up and Rarity's mane falls out completely, right before she's about to have a photo shoot with Photo Finish for Equestria's most beautiful manes. She tries to continue her chores from the start of the episode, only to be ignored and talked over by the ponies whose attention she once demanded. So Rarity begins to ask her friends for help with magical solutions and such, only for all of these to fail as her confidence wanes. Twilight gathers up the rest of the main six to remind Rarity it's not how she looks on the outside, but how she looks on the inside that matters. For as generic of a moral as this is, it manages to stay fresh the way MLP usually keeps morals fresh, by showing it's not actually the other ponies harshly judging Rarity for her hair, but Rarity herself. It's her lack of confidence that causes the other ponies to ignore her because she's no longer standing up for herself because she thinks she cannot. Nothing actually changed about Rarity, but other ponies treated her differently because she was acting like something had. Rarity decides to stop moping and fix her mane, not because she needs to, but because she wants to. Sure, it won't matter to most ponies how you look, but it does matter to Rarity. She recreates herself in a punk look to regain her confidence, fixing up all the issues the ponies had before, and making the best of situations she couldn't command earlier. After a time skip, because they have to retain continuity after all, Rarity's mane has grown back, and she finally reads Photo Finish's article, where she learns that her punk mane was recognized after all. Once upon a Zeppelin. Twilight's parents invite her on a Zeppelin cruise they recently won, and Spike convinces her to go because she deserves a day off. She makes plans for everyone to enjoy their time, with Twi herself wanting to see the Northern Star during a sunset. But before they can start enjoying their time, the cruise's director announces the real intention of the cruise. It's Iron Will's Cruise of the Princesses, and the appeal is that the ponies aboard get to spend time with the princesses and their family. As a bit of an aside, it's good to see Iron Will back in the show. He was one of my favorite one-off characters from earlier seasons. As Twilight's parents feel tricked about signing something without reading it thoroughly, they decide to cancel the trip for the sake of their daughter. But Twilight doesn't want to see her family miss out on the fun, so she volunteers to do every princess activity planned for that day, on the condition that her family gets to do whatever they want. Twilight's then kept busy with fan greets and so on, including entertaining a pony named Star Tracker, who wins the ability to follow her around as though he were family. And she gradually misses every family event she intended to do. Finally, she snaps after missing the Northern Star, the one thing on her personal to-see list. Cadance confronts her as the two have a discussion. On one hand, Twilight wants to be a good princess and give everybody what they want. On the other hand, she wants to do what she wants to do as well and relax. The middle ground to her was to do what she wanted by making every pony else happy, all at the expense of her own enjoyment. It's a common moral to be selfless, but at some point you need to draw a line and refuse to give in anymore. This doesn't make you selfish, but self-respecting. Because the thing about givers is that they eventually reach a limit to what they can give, but the takers of the world don't reach their limit. It's a lesson that Cadence is able to teach because she felt the same way before having Flurry Heart, and once she had a baby of her own, she could draw the line at whatever was best for her. Twilight makes a few apologies to those that she snapped at, then tells the rest of the ponies on the ship that she wants time alone with her family, which Iron Will agrees to, jumping off the side of the Zeppelin when the other ponies feel ripped off, because he's learned his lesson about offering money-back guarantees. Marks and Recreation. To speed along the Cutie Mark seeking process and have more fun, the Cutie Mark Crusaders open a day camp for blank flanks to seek their potential. They have a good turnout, including one, Rumble, the little brother of a Wonderbolt, Thunderlane. Rumble phones it in during the entire camp, never finding his Cutie Mark and convincing the other ponies that it's for the best, because once they find their marks, they'll be stuck doing whatever it says for the rest of their lives. Side note, but why do they still call it horseshoes in this setting? Wouldn't it just be called shoes? Rumble creates a competing camp that does nothing all day, so the ponies have the freedom not to get a Cutie Mark, and he steals all the campers from the CMCs. They ask his older brother about this and learn that Rumble's a great flyer and wants to be a Wonderbolt one day, but is worried that he might end up with a non-flying Cutie Mark that might disqualify him. So they rebrand the camp, putting an emphasis on the fact that it's for every pony and not just those who don't have Cutie Marks already, meaning all the campers get to try out every fun thing, regardless of if their Cutie Mark says it's their talent or not. Secrets and Pies. Pinkie Pie delivers a random pie to Rainbow Dash, who eats it immediately off-screen. And then Pinkie Pie finds the pie in the garbage and begins to suspect that Rainbow Dash hasn't been eating them after all, going through a few memories and realizing she's never actually seen her friend eat any of the pie she's baked over the years. And it's obvious to the audience that she's just throwing the pies away, but Pinkie Pie goes through an entire mystery to figure this out. Not so much because she isn't smart enough to, but because she can't believe some pony would lie about the gifts she's given them. After all, a good deduction is to eliminate every illogical option and then see what you're left with, and some pony hating Pinkie's cooking is, to her, illogical. Eventually she confronts Dash about her hatred of pies with a pie and then another and another, with Dash secretly getting rid of all of them until the ruse is finally revealed as Pinkie Pie's snapping. Rainbow Dash feels bad about lying to her friend, a lie a bit justified because Pinkie Pie really did crash out, to borrow some parlance, when she learned the truth, and she attempts to make it up by eating a pie she made herself. Of course, because Rainbow Dash dislikes all pie and can't tell the difference between a good one and a bad one, this final forgiveness pie is disgusting. So Pinkie, finally understanding where her friend's coming from, stops Dash from eating it, as it was enough that she was willing to try something that extreme for the sake of their friendship. Uncommon Bond. Sunburst visits Ponyville to spend time with his friend Starlight Glimmer, though they both have different ideas on what to spend their time doing. Sunburst is excited to go antiquing, meeting with Twilight in the store as they have fun looking at old artifacts. Later on, they discuss close-up magic with Trixie and perform a few tricks together, then later spend time in the caverns with Maud as they talk about old rock formations. Starlight feels left out of all of these activities except for a board game called Dragon's Pit, which they used to play as fillies, though Sunburst isn't super excited about this game because he's outgrown it. It's common to outgrow hobbies, but this also comes with the idea that as you move on from certain interests, you'll move on from the people with whom you shared the interest. If the only thing you have in common with someone is the stuff you do together, then are you actually friends? The answer is of course yes, it's just that you'll struggle to come up with the reasons to spend time with the people you care about. So Starlight asks Twilight for help, mentioning that she feels as though she's grown apart from a childhood friend, though she misinterprets Twilight's advice and uses a spell to make them kids again. Sunburst gets upset that she won't move on, and Starlight runs away, with Sunburst realizing that he's been spending more time on other hobbies than with the things they have in common. In the end, he makes a life-sized version of Dragon Pit for them to play together, an adaptation of the game for kids that makes it a little more grown-up so they can still enjoy it. Even if they did outgrow the hobby, they can't outgrow each other. It's about figuring out why you shared those interests specifically that lets you keep your friends while you grow up, not keeping the interest the same forever. The episode ends on an ominous shot of a book in a barrel. Shadow Play. The episodes open on a tale of the Pillars of Equestria, the 6 ponies who, led by Star Swirl, used their elements to save Equestria long ago. It's being read by Sunburst to the princesses, as he believes it's a clue to the disappearance of these legends around the time they fought and sealed away the Pony of Shadows. Twilight and the others spend a while trying to read through his old notes, finding the location of Ponehenge, and accidentally producing a projection of these pillars as they fought against the Pony of Shadows. They connect this to the artifacts each of the ponies used in their legends, splitting up to retrieve each of them. Applejack retrieves Rockhoof's shovel from an excavation site after pushing away a large boulder. Rarity travels to Mistbane's garden, pruning some of the overgrown plants to beautify it again, and getting her flower in exchange. Rainbow Dash and Spike find Flash Magnus's shield in the hands of Garble and trick him out of it. Fluttershy gets Meadowbrook's mask in exchange for doing a favor for Cattail, and Pinkie Pie helps Daring Do to excavate Somnambula's blindfold from the pit it was lost in. They return these artifacts to Ponehenge, which is a weird name devoid of the context of stones, and they cast a spell to unseal the pillars from the realm in which they sealed away the Pony of Darkness. Only for Star Swirl to explain in horror, this means they've also unsealed the villain as well. Now free, the Pony of Shadows destroys Ponehenge and Star Swirl's journal before attacking the others, but they're saved by Twilight and Starlight working together. As he retreats, the rest of the ponies try to find a way to seal the Pony of Shadows once again by returning to the seed of magic planted by the pillars long ago, the one that grew into the Tree of Harmony and later became the castle itself. This means the current elements of harmony were spawned from the original elements the pillars represented, but not exactly, because as time has gone on and the elements were adopted by other ponies, they have changed to a degree. The pillars all represented some positive trait, but they all represented a selfish or personal version of that trait. The newer versions of the elements of harmony are variants that are less personal and more fit to serve and support. What was once the element of strength is now the element of honesty or personal strength. It's not just enough to be strong, but to let others be strong with you. Healing has become generosity, not only to repair physical wounds, but to aid in repairing emotional ones too. Bravery is now loyalty, not to fight the bad guys, but to help the victims of these bad guys fight for themselves too. Hope has become laughter, not to simply wish the world would be better, but to make it that way. And sorcery has become friendship, which is what the rest of the episode touches on. Twilight comes up with the idea that will allow them to use modern magic to seal the Pony of Shadows only, not needing to give up the elements of harmony or steal away the pillars again to do so. Star Swirl doubts that this magic will be effective though, and explains the history of the Pony of Shadows. He was once Stygian, a scholar who united the original pillars to defend the realm, only to betray them by trying to steal their artifacts for himself. Twilight agrees to use Star Swirl's methods, though Starlight starts to suspect that there's another way, as she sees comparisons between herself and Stygian. This is reinforced when the friendship map points them to a place known as Hollow Shades. Since the friendship map usually only points them to friendship problems, she believes Stygian's evil might be solvable with the power of talking it out, instead of simply using magic to banish the problem. They arrive in an underground chamber where the Pony of Shadows has been gathering energy. His previous attempts to find a dark place to regain strength have all failed, because the old dark places are now full of life and light, again, changing just like the magic has. The gathered ponies use their elements to fight the Pony of Shadows and seal him again when Twilight notices Stygian inside the shadow, trying to rush in to help him. Here, Stygian tells her the truth. He didn't betray the pillars, he wanted to be like them, and to copy some of their powers for himself. Since they misinterpreted the spread of their abilities as theft, they banished him. This is tied to the evolution of the elements. The original elements were personal strength, so the pillars couldn't understand uplifting others, just saving the day and leaving. Stygian rejects Twilight's offer to save him, embracing the darkness because that's the only way to get power in lieu of the pillars sharing theirs. But Starlight enters the shadow, explaining that she was once in a similar position only to accept the help of the elements of harmony and become greater as a result. The rest of the elements, new and old, change strategies and work together to pull Stygian out of the shadows, saving the day by spreading their elements instead of just using them. Princess Celestia offers Star Swirl the chance to stay in Canterlot to continue teaching magic, but he turns it down, saying he'd prefer to travel the world to see all the changes he was blind to before. School days. Okay, so I had to look up what they were talking about at the start of the episode, learning there's a movie between seasons 7 and 8 being referenced here. I thought for a while maybe they were talking about events from the comic books, or maybe the episode started as a flash forward and the rest of the season would build up to it, but it turns out I just have to watch all the movies, something I was planning on doing alongside the other side works and supplemental material, including the Equestria Girls series in a separate video. Thankfully, it doesn't seem like that's all necessary, as the real reason this is brought up is to move forward with the construction and foundation of the School of Friendship. Spreading their ideology outside of Equestria would take more than just the main 6, so they're trying to recruit others for help. After getting approval from the head of the Equestria Education Association, Maurice LaMarche doing his Orson Welles voice, the school opens, not just to the ponies of Equestria, but to every sentient creature. The episode then introduces an alternative main 6 consisting of Gallus the Griffin, Sandbard the Earth Pony, Ocellus the Changeling, Silverstream the Sea Pony, Yona the Yak, and Smolder the Dragon, all brought by delegates from their respective kingdoms across the area of Equestria. Lessons go well at first until Twilight realizes they aren't following the official EEA guidebooks, which demands fewer hands-on lessons and more textbooks and note-taking lessons. This bores the student body and they begin fighting amongst themselves, a bad look for a school meant to teach friendship. The students eventually lose interest in the school entirely, skipping class to hang out at the lake, where almost immediately they begin to respect one another and their different cultures. But Chancellor Naysay, head of the EEA, makes a surprise visit to the school where he learns of the students possibly playing hooky. Twilight attempts to distract him from discovering there's anything wrong during Friends and Family Day, but when the students return suddenly and in weird forms, everybody, not just ponies, there are no longer just ponies, panics, and the school's damaged. When Naysay learns it was the result of not just students but non-pony students, he shuts the school down, claiming Twilight broke the EEA rules when she allowed other races to learn friendship. Twilight's depressed over her failure to get the school accredited, and the main 6 fails to cheer her up from the slump. But Starlight's able to motivate her to begin again, not by trying to seek out accreditation, but writing her own rulebook. It's not an EEA school she's running, but a friendship school after all. She announces that the school is going to reopen, though the rest of the main 6 are hesitant to join her as they disagreed with the way she ran it before. Twilight says it'll be better because now they can teach the lessons they want to the way their students need to be taught, and the main 6 splits up to convince the foreign leaders to send their students back to class. But they can't, as I guess the young 6 haven't returned home yet, something the elders are furious about as they blame the school for hurting their young. Now the main 6 needs to bring back the young 6 to prevent a diplomatic incident, and they have nothing to go off except the fact that they used to be friends and their own knowledge of friendship. They find Sandbar picking up snacks and follow him, assuming this will lead them to the rest of the students, confirmed when they find them camping out in the castle of the 2 sisters. They save the students from an attack by Puckwudgies, which are like evil hedgehogs, which impresses the students because they didn't realize that their lessons could have such practical applications. The students agree to return, convincing the elders that they want to go back to school. All seems to be going well until Naysay comes back, mad that Twilight's trying to open a new school. She cites the fact that this school isn't like the others, and of course she's the Princess of Friendship, so this is more her domain than his, to reopen the school, something the support of so many different races assures her won't cause the incidents the Chancellor warns her about. With every obstacle out of the way and the new course material approved by Twilight, the School of Friendship opens its doors to every pony, or everybody. Ponies have bodies too. The Maud Couple. While planning her sister's surprise birthday party, Pinkie runs into Mudbriar, who speaks slowly and literally, and immediately dislikes the guy because he made her wait extra long to get a cake. She then finds her sister and is shocked to learn Maud Pie's in like with Mudbriar. The two are now dating. Mudbriar and Maud bond over their love of sticks and rocks respectively, which Pinkie Pie doesn't understand. What she does understand, though, is that she needs to throw a surprise party for her sister, so she asks for Mudbriar's help in hosting it in an attempt to get to know the guy better. Thus far, this episode's mirrored the first introduction episode of Maud. Instead of the rest of the main 6 trying to find out what they have in common with her, they accept that Pinkie Pie likes her, and that's good enough. So Pinkie is trying to do the same thing, only to end up fighting more, as Mudbriar is convinced that Maud hates surprise parties, straining their relationship even more when Pinkie learns that Mudbriar is right. Maud only likes surprise parties because she likes seeing how excited Pinkie is to throw them. With the plan failing, she returns home to the rock farm to visit with her other sisters and ask for help. Limestone and Marble show her a geode, explaining that Mudbriar's like a geode, shiny on the inside even if you can't see it from the outside. Pinkie Pie then returns to Ponyville, still visibly disliking Mudbriar, but realizing that Maud likes him and that matters more. Much in the same way that Maud only likes surprise parties because Pinkie does, Pinkie only likes Mudbriar because Maud does. They compromise on the surprise party by throwing a fake one for a fake Maud, so Pinkie gets to be happy, and Maud doesn't need to go to a crowded place. Fake it till you make it. Rarity is behind schedule for a Canterlot fashion show and needs to pull all of her assistants to meet the deadline. As this will leave her Canterlot location unstaffed during the busiest shopping season, she recruits Fluttershy to use some of her newfound inner strength to run the store in her stead. As Fluttershy is too nervous to run the store, she takes some of Rarity's advice to don new clothing and a new persona to fake that she fits in. This persona works, but only for some of the customers. When she encounters new customers with different tastes, she has the raccoons working there make her a new outfit, and then another, and then soon, Fluttershy is swapping personas for every pony in the store. But her attempts to become more refined and fashion-forward end up incorporating all of the worst traits of the ponies she's imitating, and soon she's being rude to every customer and driving them all out. When Fluttershy insults the animals working with her, they rush to Ponyville to warn the others about her switching personality. Her friends try to help her out, only to be kicked out of the store too, so they have to return to Rarity herself. Fluttershy's always had plots about becoming more assertive, to the point that the show is making lampshade jokes about the fact that these lessons have never stuck. But it's not like she's not learning anything, so much as she isn't internalizing a single episode's lesson to the point where it overruns her entire personality. Her real character arc is not about becoming more assertive, but about learning that there are a lot of ways to assert yourself, not all of which mean getting in another pony's face. Rarity skips the fashion show to help her friend by firing each of her personas in turn until it's only Fluttershy left, and she confesses she adopted the personas because she didn't have confidence in her real self to handle the job. Rarity reminds her that her real self was the one coming up with the personas in the first place, and she did have the skills all along. Grannies Gone Wild. The Wild Blue Yonder, a Las Pegasus roller coaster popular with the Wonderbolts, is about to shut down, and Rainbow Dash wants to take time off her teaching responsibilities to visit it. Applejack agrees to substitute for her class on the condition that she escort the Gold Horseshoe Gals on their trip to Las Pegasus. Dash agrees, but AJ warns her that the Grannies can't have too much fun or they'll be overwhelmed and have to leave early. Dash attempts to ferry them there as quickly as possible, and then to send them to the hotel room early so they can nap, while she sneaks out. Dash visits the coaster only to find the line too long, and when she returns, the gals are missing. Dash then corrals them around the hotel, interrupting their horseshoe game, dictating what they can and can't eat at the buffet, stopping them from dancing, and even ruining a magic act they got to take part in, all because she assumes this is what Applejack would have done while she was chaperoning. And she is right. The Gold Horseshoe Gals complain that she's been too strict with them, just like AJ used to, and they can handle more excitement than she believes. Dash apologizes and they agree to take her on the roller coaster she wanted to, as they've been visiting the hotel for so long, they're VIP guests who can cut in line. In the end, Rainbow Dash is made an honorary Gold Horseshoe Gal, and agrees to go with them on the next trip. Surf and/or turf. The Cutie Mark Crusaders are called away on their first friendship map mission to Mount Eris. Twilight goes along to at once seek out signature from Silver Stream's parents for a permission slip, to keep an eye on the CMCs, and to have a vacation of her own, because who ever heard of a teacher proactively seeking out parental signatures? They meet Terramar, Silver Stream's brother, who swims by and offers a tour of the revitalized mountain. Of course, seeing Terra Mar's name, it's easy to see his internal conflict. His father greets them with a festival celebrating their life as hippogriffs, now that they no longer fear the Storm King, and Sweetie Belle is stricken with how nice it is up on the mountain. But Terramar's unsure whether to stay up there with his dad, or go underwater with his mom, as some of the sea ponies enjoy their home under the water too much to have ever left. He gives them a tour of Sequestria, where Scootaloo is stricken by how similar swimming is to flying around in her marketable new form. Here they see the friendship problem they need to solve. Terramar's unsure whether to stay as a sea pony with his mom or live as a hippogriff with his dad. The CMCs try to compare the two, but because they have equal pros and cons depending on who you ask, they aren't any help. Then Twilight finishes getting the permission form signed while the Sky and Sea Ponies celebrate together. The Crusaders apologize for trying to force Terramar to choose one or the other, realizing he was welcomed by both sides and could freely travel if he wanted to. There isn't too much of a solid moral in this episode. It felt like it might have been about species identity, and then later a person deciding if they are where they came from or where they're living now. Then it set up a sort of divided parents plotline, like they're going to start comparing Mount Eris to a divorce. But at the last moment drove home that the plot was neither of these. It might be for the best the show didn't go there. It's a bit too complex of a subject to cover in an episode that dedicates a metaphor to the topic instead of being upfront. I think instead it tried to set up to the audience that this might have been the metaphor, if only to have them empathize with Terramar's indecisiveness, or rather, the fact that he thought he had to be decisive. Horseplay. To celebrate Celestia's one'sversary, the 1111th year since she first raised the sun, Twilight and some of her students are putting on a play about Celestia's first time raising the sun. Celestia, usually calm and royal, breaks her demeanor to excitedly reminisce about her time as a filly, unable to act because of her studies but always having wanted to join in on a play. It's nice for the audience to see her really relaxing in this way, even to trot around her throne room at the prospect. But when Twilight invites her to take on the lead role, the rest of the ponies are worried about having to casually act alongside a princess. Though Twilight's a princess too, and they don't really get nervous around her. This is all made worse when they learn an uncomfortable truth. Princess Celestia is a bad actor. She can't enunciate with the right volume, or remember lines, or figure out dance routines. Applejack insists on telling Princess Celestia to quit, and the rest of the ponies even convince Twilight it might be best to cancel the play outright because no pony knows it's going on. Until Dash lets the whole town know already, so they have to not only put on something, but live up to the expectations Rainbow Dash has raised. Like usual, this episode's moral is one where there's not really an antagonist, as everyone involved is acting in what they think are the best interests of those around them. Twilight's not ruining the play by keeping a bad lead actress attached, because she wants to celebrate Celestia's one'sversary in a memorable way. And of course Celestia doesn't know she's ruining the play with her acting because no ponies told her as such. She has no frame of reference for what good acting entails from the perspective of one on the stage. Eventually Twilight snaps under the pressure and yells about how bad Celestia really is in earshot of the lead actress. Celestia flees and Twilight realizes that she should have been more honest, even at the cost of temporarily hurting some ponies' feelings with the truth. They put on the play with whatever they have left over, using everyone's skills to tide over the mistakes before Celestia puts on a grand finale by raising the real sun in the middle of the night. Because what better way to celebrate some ponies' accomplishments than by showing them off directly? The Parent Map. Sunburst and Starlight are both called by the Friendship Map, excited to go on a mission of their own until learning where it is, Sire's Hollow, their old hometown. They aren't happy to be home because both of them have embarrassing parents, their grievances made more literal by the state of this town. Starlight's father, Firelight, still treats her like a child, and has created a committee to preserve the town so thoroughly, ponies aren't even allowed inside half the buildings. Stellar Flare constantly tries to push her son Sunburst into creating plans for the future, and her half of the town is modernized to the point of excess. Worse is that the parents both learn of their children's mission and attempt to solve it with brute force, creating new problems to make their kids' life easier and better respectively. The two ponies sent by the Friendship Map snap at the adults for their helicopter parenting, only to realize that the problem still isn't solved and maybe it was their relationships that they were meant to improve. Starlight tells her father to stop treating her like a kid and to let her grow up with him, while Sunburst says that no plan for adulthood will ever really make him self-sufficient if his mom outlines it for him. Non-compete clause. Fluttershy has won Teacher of the Month yet again, so a jealous Rainbow Dash and Applejack attempt to prove they're worthy of the title by taking their students on a field trip, though Twilight warns them not to argue the whole time and to focus on actually teaching. They ignore this warning and try to wow the students with activities, though Applejack insists on doing everything slow and steady, while Dash insists on rushing through these activities, resulting in disaster in their apple shed building and river racing. Twilight sees Yona nearly drowning because of their neglect and warns them that a good Teacher of the Month wouldn't care about winning the award so much as teaching well. So they become ultra agreeable to ensure that they look like good teachers, even though this mostly just gets them lost in the woods. They even refuse to try their own strategies to get the students home, insisting on the other ponies' methods instead of using any of their various flyers to do the job. In the end, their failing bridges cause Dash and AJ to almost fall into the river when their students have to work together to save them. They return to the school where Twilight asks about the field trip, to which the students praise their teachers for teaching them with bad examples to show them what not to do. Twilight recognizes that this wasn't intentional, and the episode ends on the two teachers fighting once again. The Breakup Breakdown. It's Hearts and Hooves Day, and after summoning Discord to speed along the baking of a pie for Sugarbelle, Spike makes a bet with the Draconiquist about whether the season of love is real or if it's a holiday invented by greeting card companies. They do this by spying on a meeting between Big Mac and Sugarbelle, unaware that a mix-up in the post office has led to his pie being delivered to Sweetie Belle instead. They overhear Sugar talking about some news she needs to break to Big Mac, and assume it's about a breakup due to parts of it involving him not visiting her anymore. As Big Mac is heartbroken, the other two guys take him around in an attempt to cheer him up. These all fail, so to win the bet, Discord convinces him to break up with Sugarbelle first. He does so, and Sugarbelle leaves town depressed. Meanwhile, the CMCs have been trying to figure out why Sweetie Belle got a heart-shaped pie, guessing that she has a secret admirer. They search Ponyville for the identity of this admirer, only for Big Mac to yell at her for wasting his time with questions before apologizing. Now understanding that it wasn't worth it to break Sugarbelle's heart, Big Mac rushes out to catch her, which he only does because her heart broke a wheel. He confesses, and the two of them clear up the confusion. Sugarbelle is going to be taking baking classes in Ponyville, so he doesn't have to go visit her anymore. Meanwhile, the Crusaders decide to simply eat the heart pie, where they find the letter inside and learn of the mix-up. They laugh it off as Sweetie thanks her friends for spending the day looking with her, the other two being her Hearts and Hooves Day friends. Spike and Discord wrap up their bet when Discord confesses he was the one who broke the wheel, reuniting the lovers, and they play Ogres and Ooblettes together. Molt Down. Spike begins to develop itchy scales, drowsiness, loss of control of the volume of his voice, and powerful fiery belches. So, symptoms of puberty with a bit of a dragon coating. He hides out in friendship school for a time before encountering Smolder, who teaches him about molting, a time in a dragon's life where yada yada puberty metaphor. One symptom of molting, however, is the fact that dragons are typically kicked out by their parents during this time, and Spike begins to fear his symptoms will make Twilight force him to leave the nest, so to speak. So he goes to Zecora's to get a remedy, hiding from Rarity as she is there for a temporary loss of hearing, before his molting affects the rock, R-O-C, rock, that wants to eat the pubescent dragon. They flee from this beast for a while as it grabs Rarity and Zecora, with Twilight fighting it off. Then Spike is encased in stone, bursting out with new wings. He flies up to distract the rock, blasting it with fire and saving his kidnapped friends. In the end, he explains to Twilight that it's time for him to leave the nest, but she says that's just a dragon tradition, not a pony one, and allows him and his wings to stay longer. The My Little Pony intended audience is likely at the stage in their life where a lengthy puberty metaphor would be important to explain, but it's not like the show hasn't already had Cutie Mark episodes with the same general concept. The difference is that this episode focuses more on the physical changes of puberty and the psychological effects that these might have on the one experiencing them. Spike is worried because he's gone through similar changes before, kidnapping Rarity and becoming a monster, but everybody has some reason to fear impending change, especially when the path to get there is so itchy. Marks for Effort. The Cutie Mark Crusaders are spying on the School of Friendship, hoping to learn more about it and eventually deciding they want to enroll. But Twilight shoots down this offer, claiming that they already know everything about friendship they need to. The Crusaders really want to join the school anyway, so they fake friendship issues to convince the other ponies they still have a lot to learn. This sort of makes sense since the point of higher education is that even the professors are still studying their fields. Knowing a lot about a subject doesn't mean you can't learn any more. But then they meet a filly named Cozy Glow, a student at Twilight's friendship school who's sad that she's struggling with her friendship lessons. so the CMCs offer to help her out, showing her a few things about friendship and even volunteering to tutor her in a few of the ways of the main six. Cozy Glow has a friendship test later on that she fails, with Twilight calling the others in and yelling at them for pranking their new friend by teaching her wrong on purpose. The Crusaders are dejected about this until Cozy confesses the truth to Starlight. She failed on purpose so the Crusaders would look bad enough to get accepted, following in the footsteps of their original plan. Once the truth is out, the main six gather the Crusaders back at school to give them honorary degrees and positions as full-time tutors. The Mean Six. Posing as a photographer, Queen Chrysalis steals a hair from each of the main six and takes them to the Everfree Forest where she plans to use a spell to copy their forms so she can steal the elements of harmony. Meanwhile, the real main six are in the forest on a camping trip, traveling together in spite of a few minor disagreements between them. Queen Chrysalis has her Mean Six searching the woods for the location of the elements, while the Mean Twilight realizes they would be better off without the Changeling Queen bossing them around. They all end up separated, with the main six searching for one another and finding their mean counterparts, getting frustrated as they exhibit opposite personalities than usual. The mean personalities are close to the behaviors they showed at the start of Season 2, when Discord took over and flipped their personalities. It's a bit charming to see them all regress to these older forms. It makes you appreciate the characters even more when you see what they can't be. Sometimes in writing, the best way to explore a character is to create an opposite of that character, then explore what they do, how, and why. After brief encounters with their opposites, the main seven are angry and frustrated with one another, arguing for a moment that comes to a head when Twilight silences them. She says that, regardless of whether they're upset with one another at the moment, they're still friends and should give a little bit of leeway for uncharacteristic bouts of anger. It's normally infuriating to watch a show and see an imposter character act rude, then have to have every other character immediately turn on someone who they've allegedly known for years. And while this is the case in this episode, the real moral is about judging your friends based on what you know about them instead of ignoring a decade of friendship because of one bad camping trip. Meanwhile, the Mean Six make it to the Tree of Harmony, where the Mean Twilight attempts to take power for herself. But due to not embodying the elements they're supposed to, the fake ponies simply revert back to the wood they were made from, as Queen Chrysalis retreats into the night, the main seven unaware she was ever involved. A matter of principles. Twilight is called away from preparations about a scavenger hunt because the main six's cutie marks are all calling them away at once. Since there are no teachers left in the school, Twilight puts Starlight in charge for the indeterminate future, and she begins to worry she isn't ready to take on that level of responsibility. It's kind of a build-up from her arc 2 episodes ago, where she was feeling left out, as very few of the students ever need her as a guidance counselor. Now, thrust into the extra responsibility she wanted, she realizes she isn't ready for this either. And what she really isn't ready for is Discord, who shows up on campus ranting about how he's never been invited to the school since it opened, and deciding to change a few things about the building to satisfy his whims. This includes hiring new, unqualified teachers, and when Starlight shoots this idea down, he decides to take and then disrupt the classes himself. Starlight gets fed up with this plea for attention and banishes him from the campus, though this doesn't stop Discord from continuing to cause, well, discord around the school by ruining the scavenger hunt and endangering the kids. Eventually, Starlight realizes that Discord's only acting up for attention, and apologizes for not listening to her friend, which is a bit of a one-sided issue, as Discord endangering students is certainly worse than Starlight yelling at him for endangering the students. But she offers him a position as vice principal so he won't feel so left out. As someone who's had a lot of family in education and has been the sympathetic ear to their woes before, I can say that this position is more of a punishment than a prize. It doesn't matter though, as the main six returns from what they realized was a fake mission created by Discord to get them out of the school, as the rest of the students celebrate things are back to normal. I've mentioned before how My Little Pony often introduces new characters as a means to retread character growth and to enable the writers to reuse morals with slight changes without making it feel like the cast isn't growing. This episode has examples of this through Starlight having shown all the things she's internalized from before, but it also has an example of this same trope being done poorly, Discord acting the way he more or less always has. The fact that he's been in the show longer and still seems to need the friendship lessons more than Starlight, who is now teaching them, is a sign of a frustratingly stagnant character. The Hearts-Warming Club. It's the night before winter break, and the School of Friendship's decorated for Heart's-warming Eve as the students are about to be sent away. But somebody pulls a prank on the tree, covering it in purple goo, before escaping in the direction of the dorms. Twilight and Rainbow Dash try to get to the bottom of who pulled this prank, taking the young six apart as they're the only ones in that building, and questioning them one by one as the other five are forced to clean the room. If none of them confesses, then they'll all have to stay over the holidays for extra lessons. As they're being questioned, each of the remaining students discusses what kind of hearts-warming traditions they have back at home, or at least the similar holidays they celebrate. The Changelings have a misinterpretation of hearts-warming based on literally reading Twilight's writings about the pony traditions. The Yaks mostly smash things, but they do it together. The Dragons exchange stories, with the best story winning a hoard of jewels, and the Sea Ponies have several days of familiar festivities. Who does not have a way to celebrate is Gallus of the Griffins, as he doesn't have a family of his own to spend the holidays with. After hearing all the other stories, he confesses his plan to get them all in trouble so he could spend Hearts-Warming Eve with his close friends in the extra lessons, but he no longer wants to hold them back from their celebrations. Hearing this, Twilight decides that only Gallus has to stay back, but the rest of the young six volunteer to stay and clean with him. Realizing they don't need friendship lessons after all, Twilight allows them to spend the entire holiday together. After they clean up the mess, that is. Friendship University. After reading a few postcards from Star Swirl's independent friendship research, Cozy Glow shows Twilight a flyer for Friendship University, a university that offers friendship lessons. Duh. But that explicitly says it's better than Twilight School. She and Rarity investigate this FU, maybe a different name, where they learn it's run by the Flim Flam brothers. Twilight wants to call it out as a fake school, but it gets accredited by Naysay after he learns Star Swirl himself is enrolled, as are plenty of other ponies, because enrollment is free. Twilight is insistent that there's a scam in there somewhere, so she and Rarity don disguises of varying convinciveness and enroll in the free university. Rarity quickly rises to the top of the student body as she's already a friendship expert, while Twilight snoops around, only to find the lesson plans are completely legitimate. Worse, the Flim Flam brothers get a picture of her snooping around and threaten to make her look jealous instead of friendly, threatening the foundation of her competing school. Twilight is confident there's still a scam though, and when she's talking to Rarity about it, she finds out what it is. Enrollment is free, but advancing through classes is not, and they charge for the worksheets. Ostensibly, the fees are meant to pay for the school's maintenance itself, which wouldn't be a problem, but the best scams are ones that take legitimate needs and arguments and simply exaggerate demand for some things. The actual stockpiled fees are going towards expansions of the Flim Flam hotel chain. When they show Star Swirl this fact, he threatens to withdraw his support of the university unless they return the money they lied to get. In the end, Star Swirl recommends Twilight School to the former students, as Twilight and Rarity wonder how the Flim Flam brothers got their hooves on the friendship worksheets. The End in Friend. Twilight uses Rarity and Rainbow Dash as an example of two ponies with very little in common who are friends anyway, but when the students ask them to prove it, they struggle to show tangible evidence of their friendship. This is made worse when they're followed on a day out, with Rarity ruining Dash's Buckball game while Dash is audibly bored while Rarity is shopping. This introduces a difficulty with the concept of a friendship school, that being friends with some pony isn't something that you can prove, nor is there an objective way to show whether two individuals are friends or acquaintances or co-workers who tolerate one another. Friendship's a subjective concept. There's been about 8 seasons of lessons on it thus far, so it has to be. So the idea of teaching friendship through anything other than experience is an impossible task, only done because it's not a concept that gets thought about too often. Friendship School works for a kids show, but it stops working if you try to work out the logistics. So instead of attempting to avoid the conversation, this episode gets in front of it. As it turns out, Rarity and Rainbow Dash can't prove they're friends when put on the spot, but it's likely very few can. They attempt to support the argument by pointing out times they've saved the world together or specific episode plots, but the students just keep asking and pressing the issue until the ponies realize maybe they aren't friends. Realizing there's a friendship problem, Starlight teleports away and returns with an urgent warning about a stolen artifact that Rarity and Rainbow Dash have to track down together. They head out on a journey using their respective strengths, saving the day without really thinking about why such a conveniently timed problem had to be solved by them alone. It's revealed the artifact was never missing, and their trail to it led to a secret room of the school, with the students watching the entire thing unfold as they finally understand why the two are friends. This, in spite of the fact that they were told the two had worked together before. Nothing ever changed, but the students seeing it in person. Yakity-Sax. Pinkie Pie has found a new love in the ovidophone, a yak instrument she plays so badly the other ponies confuse it for a dying animal. Despite her lack of skill, they agree she is new to the instrument, so they ought to be supportive as she's learning the basics. But after a few days, Pinkie hasn't improved at all. Worse is that her playing is so bad, it's beginning to disrupt the lives of every pony in Ponyville, ruining crops and keeping animals up at night. Remembering the issue with Celestia's bad acting and the issues caused by refusing to speak up, they confront Pinkie Pie and, in spite of a few difficulties like who's actually going to break the news, they ask her to stop playing the ovidophone near them. Pinkie Pie gives up the instrument and starts moping around, depressed with no color in her mane. So the other ponies attempt to cheer her up with all the other things she enjoys, failing to get her to smile even as they throw a party for her. They find out from Maud that Pinkie Pie has decided to move out of Ponyville and live with the Yaks so she can at least listen to the instrument being played well. They follow her to Yakistan, where they find a depressed Pinkie Pie sulking in a bar. But once she gets to touch a ovidophone, she cheers up, and the rest of the main six realizes the only way to get her to cheer up is to play the instrument badly again. At least that's what they assume, until the Yaks loudly cheer her performance, not because of the quality, but her enthusiasm. This episode explicitly calls attention to earlier morals, that it's better to temporarily disappoint your friends with harsh honesty than to let a situation continuously get worse by refusing to mention when you're being harmed. It then expands on this earlier lesson in both ways, firstly by having the main six confront Pinkie Pie immediately, only for this to backfire as she winds up hurt by their honesty too much. Then, it confronts that lesson from Pinkie herself, who would rather pack up everything and move away from Ponyville than to tell her friends how much the ovidophone meant to her. It's hypocritical that she would expect her friends to be honest with her and then refuse to open up to them, acting instead of being open like they did. Almost as bad as failing to recognize when they're uncomfortable despite the amount of sacrifice they've made to accommodate her practice time. Friendship needs to go both ways. When your friends make space for you to be annoying, you also need to make sure you don't take advantage of that kindness. Pinkie Pie made her friends tolerate her ovidophone hobby, but refused to tolerate their want of silence. On the road to friendship. After a great magic performance by Trixie and Starlight, the duo is approached by a saddle Arabian named Hufar, who offers them the chance to take their show on the road. He also offers to trade wagons with Trixie, as hers isn't fit for such a long journey. But Trixie has too much sentimental attachment to give it up, offering her assistant the opportunity to ride together in the cramped space. In spite of a few issues, the two happily sing about what great friends they are on their journey in a Crosby and Hope pastiche this audience probably recognizes more from the Family Guy parodies. But once they make it to Somnambula, their disagreements begin to pile on more noticeably, with arguments arising over their lack of funding and the fact that they can't find a place to eat or sleep, forced into the cramped caravan Trixie brought. Their next show is a disaster due to their arguing, and soon, Starlight has enough, and trades Trixie's wagon to Hufar without asking. This is the last straw, and they separate, though as Starlight retraces their old steps, she realizes that the dangerous road was a lot more fun to travel with a friend. Eventually, she turns around and offers to trade back, apologizing to Trixie for selling it without asking. It's a little contrived, but Hufar only agrees to trade back if they can prove they're friends again, something he's only convinced of when they awkwardly attempt to recreate Twilight and Cadence's Ladybug song. The two ponies return home with the argument behind them, understanding that just because you get along with some pony doesn't mean you'll still get along after living and traveling with them. The Washouts. While snooping on her own fan club meeting, Rainbow Dash is shocked to see Scootaloo change allegiances to the Washouts, a new stunt organization running opposite the Wonderbolts. Rainbow Dash is upset that her number one fan is no longer exclusively a fan of hers, so they go to see a Washout performance live. Although Dash is, at first, impressed by their dangerous show, she begins to lose respect for the group when she learns they're led by Lightning Dust, as well as all of them being former Wonderbolt hopefuls who washed out of the auditions. The two begin to feud, with Lightning Dust eventually inviting Scootaloo back to potentially join them later on, as she says she can be a washout even though she can't fly. These are the two core issues of the episode. Scootaloo's enthusiasm is being exploited by the washouts to get her to perform a dangerous stunt, as the group is concerned more with showing up their former allies than common sense. The other is that Rainbow Dash is trying to help Scootaloo, not because she cares for her safety, but because she cares about her fan club. On one hand, Dash certainly ought to support her basically sibling in anything she wants to do, but on the other, she has to stop her from being exploited. It's a conflict between a pony who wants to do the right thing for the wrong reasons versus a pony who encourages the filly to follow her dreams, but only if those dreams support her flight show. When the day of the washouts performance arrives, Scootaloo begins to second guess if it's a good idea, but Lightning Dust tells her that testing for safety is a waste of time. Then she pushes the filly onto a rocket stunt. Rainbow Dash flies by and saves her at the last second, as Lightning is caught in the trick due to lax safety, flying into the sky where presumably she ends up in a full-body wing and hoof cast, drinking through a straw. A Rockhoof and a Hard Place. The pillar Rockhoof is back in his hometown, which is now an archaeological dig, struggling to contribute because he keeps telling them the tales of the objects instead of carefully cataloging them. So Twilight is asked to find another job for him, and she puts him to teaching. Though once again, Rockhoof struggles to fit in, literally because he keeps breaking things with his size. The students love the professor, but his inability to adapt to the new world means he can't stay in friendship school forever. So the main six decide to address this friendship problem by showing off Rockhoof's old friends, hoping that seeing them adapt will help him with his own problem. Flash Magnus has become a drill sergeant for the Canterlot Royal Guard. Mistmane is the head gardener of the Crystal Empire. Somnambula is a motivational speaker. Meadowbrook is back at home running her pharmacy, and Stygian is a best-selling author, and Star Swirl is still traveling Equestria, studying friendship. This only makes Rockhoof feel worse, as he's the only one of the pillars who hasn't adapted to the new time period. So he asks Twilight to turn him into a statue, just like Discord once was, so he can be a literal relic and not just a spiritual one. But before Twilight can cast the spell, Yona approaches, one of the students who loved him the most, and she encourages Rockhoof to tell one of his stories one last time. Seeing the huge crowd that gathered to watch the man speak, Twilight has the idea to make him the official lore keeper, traveling Equestria to tell old stories and keep history alive. What lies beneath? The young six are struggling to learn about Ponyville's history, specifically about the Tree of Harmony and its influence on current events. But Sandbar, due to coming from Ponyville, knows most of this already, and offers to teach the rest of his friends about it in a study group. Cozy Glow sees them studying and begins to imply that the non-pony students are at an academic disadvantage due to not being ponies, ruining the vibe of the group. Cozy Glow's cutie mark is a chess piece, and she's yet to be seen playing chess or any other sort of board game, not to mention how she keeps poking around whenever something suspicious is going on. Between trying to infiltrate some of the inner circles of the school and how she's implied to have given Flim and Flam Twilight's notes, the fact that now she's parodying some of Naysay's pony supremacy makes her look suspicious, but then again I don't earn any points for acknowledging that the character in a kid's show who keeps having minor key musical stings play whenever she's around is suspicious. Anyway, the young six notice a glowing grate in the library and crawl inside to investigate, where a glowing Twilight tells them it's unacceptable not to believe in friendship before banishing them each to separate rooms. Each of them then has to face their worst fears. Gal is trapped in a room that keeps shrinking, Silverstream seeing shadows of the Storm King terrorizing an empty Mount Eris, Yona trapped in a room full of spiders, Smolder stuck in a maze with ponies who want to dress her up, Ocellus forced to confront Changeling history in the form of Chrysalis, and Sandbar asked to go on a friendship mission with his heroes who want him to leave his friends behind. Gallus is able to escape by noticing a pattern in the light, where he meets with Smolder, who accepted the makeover the other ponies gave her. But rather than leaving, they turn around to make sure the rest of their group is okay, showing Silverstream that the Storm King is just a shadow on the wall, dispelled by not being afraid of him. They tell Ocellus that, even if the Changelings have a bad history, their future is still hers to decide. Yona returns with a swarm of spiders that she befriended, and they all meet Sandbar as he tells off the fake main six for forcing him to abandon his friends. In the end, they escape to the surface, though they're too tired to take the test now. Cozy Glow offers to cover for their lateness and give them an extension on the condition that they don't mention the grate to the other ponies, and the episode ends on her glowing ominously. Sounds of Silence. The friendship map sends Fluttershy and Applejack to the Peaks of Peril, a rarely visited area inhabited by the kind and gentle Kieran, as well as the cruel and evil Nerik. They head out, briefly diverted by Fluttershy trying to help out some squirrels, who show them a shortcut to the Kieran village. They arrive to meet with the Kieran, though the Kieran don't talk, simply answering yes-no questions asked by the other two. Applejack assumes that the Kieran won't speak, and tries various things to trick them into talking, while Fluttershy assumes that they can't speak and attempts to learn more about them. The two split up, and Applejack soon meets with Autumn Blaze, an incredibly talkative Kieran who lives alone in the forest, singing her feelings because she's excited to meet another creature to talk to. Her song, which I think is one of the better ones in My Little Pony, despite not usually being a song-enjoying type, explains that the Kieran and the Nerik are the same species, and they transform based on their emotions. After burning down their entire village in a rage, they were ordered to bathe in the stream of silence, eliminating not just their voices, but personalities as well. Autumn was one of the only Kieran to want her voice back, something she achieved after stumbling into a field of false-breath flowers which restored voices. For being able to speak, she was banished, unable to convince any of the others to get their emotions back. Applejack takes this news to Fluttershy, who learned the same thing, but she sympathizes with the silent Kieran, as she doesn't want the forest to be hurt again. The two disagree on what is best to do about the Kieran, so the Kieran, seeing them argue, carry the two to the stream of silence to stop them from fighting. They are saved by Autumn in her Nerik form, using her anger to overpower the others, not in a blind rage, but to save them from the same fate. The moral of the episode is pretty simple. It's better to take the good and bad emotions together because it's never worth losing both. The way this lesson is taught is by explaining how emotions, even ones like anger, aren't inherently negative. It's what you do with the emotion that matters. Anger, when righteous, can be used as a force for good, like Fluttershy getting angry at Applejack for not paying attention to the squirrels at the start of the episode, the same squirrels who, at the end, show the ponies where to find more false breath to save the village. The rest of the village is moved by the display of the two friends arguing without burning anything down, and they agree to have the gift of speech again, this time with more self-control instead of magical restrictions. Father Knows Beast. Spike is struggling with his flying lessons until Smolder comes by and shows him that the pony techniques he's learning won't work with a dragon's non-feathered wings. After thanking him for teaching him about being a real dragon, Spike and Smolder see something fall from the sky, revealed as Sludge, a new dragon who injures himself in the fall. Sludge insists that he doesn't need any help recovering, but Spike insists on taking him to the castle to heal anyway, where over a montage, Sludge enjoys the comforts of the castle. He's about to leave when Sludge overhears that Spike is an orphan, and then admits he is Spike's long-lost father. Spike asks about how he was lost as a child, and Sludge gives him a story about a traveling mother with some dragon hunters. Despite the rest of the ponies poking some holes in this story, Spike believes it, and is happy to finally meet his family. Sludge then declares he and Spike are going to make up for lost time, but they mostly do pony-like activities because that's all Spike really knows how to do. So Sludge offers to teach him to be more dragon-like, throwing away all the creature comforts at the castle to live in the wilderness nearby, as Sludge lives in luxury like dragons are supposed to. Smolder catches Spike sleeping in a bush and asks why he's doing this, not believing Spike when he says he's just doing what dragons do, because Smolder knows better. Smolder and Spike are both dragons, though neither of them has an especially normal life. Spike was raised by ponies and knows little of his culture. Smolder is living with various creatures in a friendship school, something Ember says dragons basically have never done before. And yet, Spike is still able to learn to be more dragon-like from Smolder, as Smolder is adapting to her current lifestyle with Spike's help, the two becoming better from the assistance of a creature who isn't dragon-like at all. The truth is that the ideal of a dragon is something no dragon can really live up to, just something they can try to live up to. The truth is that a dragon is as a dragon does. Spike and Smolder are dragons, so whatever they do is dragon-like. And a creature who tries to dictate how to be more like a real dragon is only out to take advantage of you. Sludge tells Spike to serve him and give up all of his stuff, exploiting the desire to improve his dragonness to live a better life at Spike's expense. They tell Sludge that they're going to live in an uncomfortable cave, and Sludge finally admits that he hypocritically wants to stay in the castle, eventually giving up the ruse and admitting he isn't actually Spike's father, just a passing dragon who wanted to take advantage of the situation. Spike accepts himself regardless of how dragon-y he really is, because it's best to come up with a personality first, then to label it, than it is to come up with the label first and then change your personality to fit in. The only creatures who want that are those who want to change you, not to accept you. School Raze. During a field trip to Cloudsdale, Starlight's magic spell to keep the students afloat fails, and they fall. When they warn Twilight of this, her magic begins to fail too, and they soon learn that most of the unicorns of Equestria are beginning to lose their abilities. They're called to meet with Princess Celestia to make a plan on what to do, worried as Star Swirl writes to them that all magic in Equestria will be gone within 3 days. They leave Starlight in charge of the school as they leave, much to the annoyance of Cozy Glow, who prepped all 7 of them for the journey. They head to Tartarus, assuming Tyrek is responsible for draining magic like he did before. They manage to make it the whole way to Tartarus without the use of any magic save for a one-use artifact that unseals the door. But when they reach the Centaur, they discover he is still weak and imprisoned, revealing it wasn't him who's draining the magic but his pen pal back in Ponyville. The next day, Cozy's in charge of the school, mentioning that Starlight left a letter behind saying she's in charge. In spite of these students wondering why Starlight wouldn't tell them in person, Cozy proceeds to run the school with multiple distractions, giving the students whatever they want so they don't think too hard about the magic running out, or all the adults being absent. All the adults except for Naysay, who's declared himself in charge in the absence of any pony else as he begins to expel the non-pony students. Sandbar is tied up with the others, pretending to agree with Naysay's anti-pony ideology so he can escape and warn the Cutie Mark Crusaders of the takeover. But they soon learn it wasn't Naysay who took over the school, but Cozy herself, having bound Starlight with the school's artifacts while she's draining the magic. The main 6, 7 counting Spike, which I assume they do as he has little to do for the rest of the two-parter, realize they're trapped inside Tartarus with Tyrek, all according to his end of the plan. What he did not plan for was the fact that he's trapped in Tartarus with them too, and Pinkie Pie is set to the task of annoying him into compliance as they attempt to use the latent magic inside all the creatures there to make enough magic to open the door from the inside, only to succeed, then realize they're too late. Back at the school, Cozy Glow plots to use the students for her purposes of eliminating Naysay from his position in charge of the school. Once they overthrow him, Cozy reveals her plan to eliminate all the magic and get the head ponies out of her way, so she can run the school in such a way as to weaponize the power of friendship, something she's already shown she can do by manipulating every pony else into attacking her enemies or locking themselves in Tartarus. The Cutie Mark Crusaders free the Student 6 from their arrest. Then they distract Cozy long enough for the others to free Head Mare Naysay, who agrees to use the remaining magic in his amulet to warn the princesses about the takeover. The rest of the students return to the roots of the Tree of Harmony so they can free Starlight from her prison. But Cozy brings the student body into the room and tricks them into believing the Student 6 are attacking the school out of jealousy that magic ponies have. The student body attacks them, only to be confused when the Student 6 sacrifices themselves in a last-ditch effort to save their teacher. The tree recognizes this sacrifice and frees them from the prison so they can safely remove the artifact based on their history lessons from Twilight's class. Seeing the Tree of Harmony granting friendship powers to non-ponies of the Student 6, the rest of the students turn against Cozy Glow in time for everyone else in charge to use their now available magic to surround her. In the end, the Student 6 preps for graduation, though they admit there's still a lot of friendship they don't know yet. Naysay agrees that Twilight's been a good teacher, and Cozy Glow is put into Tartarus with her pen pal, where she plots to use friendship for evil yet again. Central to this season's overarching plot was Chancellor Naysay's belief that teaching non-ponies the magic of friendship would lead to the destruction of Equestria. But then it was another pony who used the magic for ill purposes, as the non-ponies teamed up to save the day, even willing to sacrifice themselves to do so. His idea was based on the fact that non-ponies were never taught friendship and thus never taught how to safely wield it, like friendship is a weapon that requires a degree of trigger discipline to use the right way. The school did, in fact, teach the right way to use this power, as shown by the crowd of ponies near the end. They tried to help out their friend Cozy Glow, but eventually realized through her actions and not her words that she didn't have their best interests at heart, after she refused to do anything about magic draining away. So why don't non-ponies know about the magic of friendship? Well, because no pony teaches it to them. The Equestria Education Association forbids teaching it to non-ponies, then uses their lack of knowledge as justification for why they shouldn't be allowed to study it. Prejudice is often the cause of prejudice. Cozy Glow's plan was to rule using the power of friendship to manipulate others into doing her bidding, eliminating any of the potential checks to that power, be they through mechanics like artifacts, or ponies like the main six, who could otherwise teach friendship the right way. Taking over the school was an important part of her plan, and the fact that she didn't do it earlier was part of her undoing. Because the students didn't just learn about the magic of friendship, but the friendship part as well. They learned to do kind things not because you wanted ponies to owe you a favor, but because kindness is the right thing to do. Even as the student body is going after them for opening the portal draining all the magic, they still focus not on making themselves look innocent, but solving the problem. It's a villain plan that was doomed to fail from the start, just like Tyrek being trapped in Tartarus with the ponies he can't stand. Cozy Glow eventually would have lost the friendship of the other ponies once they realized she didn't have their best interest in mind. She used to have the Cutie Mark Crusaders, Naysay, the Student Six, and even the Head Mare on her side, but slowly betrayed each of them. When your MO is to backstab your way to the front of the line, eventually you end up with nothing but enemies behind you. The beginning of the end. Twilight and the others are called to Canterlot for an emergency meeting to let them know there's no emergency. And there hasn't been a major emergency since, like, the end of the last episode, meaning Equestria is in an unprecedented era of peace. As such, Celestia and Luna plan to retire, passing their leadership to Twilight, who immediately panics because she isn't convinced she's ready for this responsibility. Meanwhile, Grogar has resurrected and summoned all the major villains of Equestria thus far to his lair, where he points out all their collective failures to defeat Twilight and her power of friendship. He suggests that they borrow the idea, to work together to defeat the main six, then rule as a team. But Sombra rejects this, saying he can attack the Crystal Empire without the others, and rule without their help too. Twilight is busy trying to tie up all the loose ends before she gives up everything but the throne. When she attempts to pass on the school to Starlight, Starlight acts like Twilight and mirrors her anxieties. Twilight calms her down with the words she herself would want to hear, but this doesn't work to assuage all her fears. And then she learns of Sombra's invasion of the Crystal Empire. When Twilight calls the others together to resist Sombra's invasion, Discord joins them, and Twilight asks him to simply use chaos magic to fix everything, but he insists that it's their responsibility to solve the problem, so Twilight does it alone, or rather with the main six and the elements of harmony. They arrive at a Crystal Empire that's already fallen, though the main six quickly overcome their fears long enough for Spike to free the Royals, who take back the heart and drive away Sombra for good. Or so they think. When they return the elements of harmony, the elements shatter, with Sombra appearing before them laughing at his real success. The main six fret over the loss of the elements, unable to fight back against Sombra's magic as he imprisons them and sets out to conquer Ponyville. They only sulk for a while. Ultimately, they decide that they can't sit around and wait for all their loved ones to be mind-controlled. They dig their way out and return to the fight again, but this attempt, predictably, fails because they don't have the elements to back them up. This doesn't stop them from resisting, though, noticing that without the Tree of Harmony around, the Everfree Forest is beginning to take over Ponyville. They fight it back as long as they can, relieved only when Star Swirl and the princesses show up to help them out, so they can free Canterlot, the real target of Sombra's plan. They struggle to get past the brainwashed armies of their former friends in a scene that exists to show off all the ponies they've met and befriended in the last 8 seasons. This is the final season. It was likely clear to the folks working on the show this would be the final season as well. This is why all the villains are coming together under the banner of an antagonist from the original series, something I only know because it was a statement from the show, actually, in what feels like a finale due to just how many callbacks the showrunners have made. Twilight teleports them past all the ponies as they can't fight their friends without hurting them. Then they're accosted by the brainwashed Royal Guard. Unable to overpower these ponies, Twilight breaks down and finally asks Discord to dispose of them for her, which, after some prodding, he does. They enter Sombra's throne room with Discord taking out all his attacks with ease, until one is launched at Fluttershy that knocks him out. With no creature left to depend on, Twilight and the others have to fight Sombra on their own, which they do because, alluding to what Star Swirl said before, the elements of harmony were simply the result of seeds that Pillars planted to become the tree. That's a lot of proper nouns and callbacks. This really is a final season. They defeat Sombra with a friendship laser beam. I don't know why the power of friendship always manifests as a big laser beam. And he evaporates into light. The princesses come back to the throne room to see the ponies nursing Discord back to health. They admit they're not really going to step down because there are still too many threats, and Twilight's not ready yet. Though a part of her testing to see if she is ready included seeing whether Twilight was capable of asking for help when she needed it. Although she failed at this, she's humble enough to recognize that she failed. Discord admits that he was never really hurt, mirroring Starlight Glimmer's earlier gambit to lure Twilight's inner feelings out. Back at Grogar's cavern, he shows them Sombra's failure to further convince the rest of the villains that they ought to work together. Uprooted. The Student Six have a collective dream/nightmare involving Twilight in the form of the Tree of Harmony, asking for help. They rush back to the school outside of the school year to ask Twilight about this tree, which she's shocked to hear about because it was recently destroyed. Upon confirming it is indeed destroyed, they vow to do something about it, leaving to get permission from their guardians before returning to see an empty cave. Sandbars removed all the old pieces of tree so they could plant a new one together, which they're annoyed by as they all have different ideas on what the tree meant when it asked for help. Gallus wanted it to be a museum, albeit he makes a tacky one that exaggerates the actual story of the tree to be more appealing to tourists. Silverstream paints the cave walls to express how she felt about learning it was destroyed. Smolder wants to make a statue commemorating the tree. And Ocellus wants it to be a meditation area to reflect on what the tree meant, though she drops her fountain while moving it, setting off a Rube Goldberg machine that destroys everyone else's idea. Looking at the ruins of their projects, the plot then rehashes the conflict from Castle Sweet Castle, where each of the main six argued over what they ought to do with Twilight's castle before deciding on something together. This time, their plan is to rebuild the tree from the crystalline remains into a tree house, like a house made of a tree. After a second montage, the treehouse grows into a treehouse, but like a different kind, and the Student Six enters their own playset, made from the remains of the Tree of Harmony, but transformed into something better adapted to the new cast. On one hand, I get what this episode is going for thematically. Things don't last forever no matter how much you want them to. The best way to honor the past is not by mindlessly recreating it, but by trying to figure out why these things were so honored in the first place and to live the way they would want. The Tree of Harmony was the sign of the friendship of the holders of the elements, and while this is certainly what's being built up to, it has to be built up to it, not simply maintained. On the other hand, the main six had 5 seasons of build-up to become the new elements of harmony before they got their playset. The Student Six have had less than a season, of which only a few of them have really gotten to be the focus of an episode. It's one thing to show that time is moving on and new souls take the positions of the old ones, but this plot only works if you guess what the writers are going for and interpret it that way. There isn't a lot of textual evidence that the Student Six actually embodies anything because we don't have the time with them yet. Sparkles 7. Shining Armor challenges Twilight to the Sibling Supreme Contest, one they've been having since they were young, with the contest being about testing the security of the Canterlot Castle for any holes Sombra might exploit. Twilight gets her friends together for a plot where each of them has a role fitting their specialties, but Shining Armor sends a letter taunting her with the exact plan. So they decide to make a different one that the castle can't predict because they'll each be having a role performed by some pony unfit for it. They swap positions around and perform semi-randomly, getting close to the castle but making little progress and ending up lost as they reconnect in the courtyard. Seeing their failure, Twilight decides that the real unpredictable plan would be to do the original plan despite Shining Armor predicting it. This gets them into the throne room where the Sibling Supreme crown is waiting, though Shining Armor and the princesses emerge from behind the throne, stopping Twilight and friends at the last second. What they don't predict, though, is that Luna would simply give the crown to Spike, with Spike winning the contest. In his own words, Spike always secretly wished he could be treated like a regular sibling, as he was raised with the rest of the family but never got that recognition as the youngest brother. But the fact that he was always ignored in these contests is how he was able to find a hole in the castle's defenses. Luna is treated by Celestia the same way Spike used to be treated by Twilight. Not necessarily ignored, just overlooked and underestimated. Spike reveals that he bonded with Luna over this, and she worked with him to allow the others into the castle, from getting Celestia out of the way at first, to putting Zephyr Breeze in charge of security. Shining Armor and Twilight agree that Spike deserves the crown. Being the younger brother they always knew he could be. As a bit of a side note, I like the expressions in this season, that the characters are more frequently looking silly when they're excited. It adds a lot more to their personalities to see the extremes in their emotions, even when the extremes aren't always friendly faces. The Point of No Return. Twilight finds an old book and some of the things Celestia sent back from Canterlot, freaking out as it's an unreturned library book. Spike convinces her to face her shame and return it, in spite of the fact that it will mean losing her perfect returning streak. But when she finally works up the courage to bring back the overdue book, she learns it's so overdue she has to talk to a specialist who's out to lunch. Spike and Twilight find this specialist while she's dining with Moondancer, where they explain that the old head librarian lost her job over the fact that a single book wasn't returned on time. So Twilight changes plans to track down Dusty Pages, so she can get her perfect record back too. Her motivation is as much about Twilight's pursuit of perfection as it is the librarian's. She values being flawless and assumes other ponies will as well. It takes some searching, but they find her in a retirement home with a packed schedule, sending them all over the place, winding up in a food fight where Twilight finally confesses the truth. But Dusty Pages doesn't care for her old job back at the library, saying that when she learned of the overdue book and how it ruined her perfect streak, she felt liberated rather than terrified. She, like Twilight, was so focused on being perfect, she forgot to do anything else with her life. Losing her librarian job is what gave her the permission to finally try other things. This is something that Twilight herself has already learned, she just never internalized it. She didn't even know she had lost her perfect record until it was already long gone, because she was spending too much time enjoying her life to care. Twilight returns the book. Ironically, it was one about why being perfect is pointless, and learns that late fees are capped at a single month, as well as the fact that they've already replaced the book with a newer edition, so she can keep the old one. Common Ground. Appaloosa has built a new Buckball stadium due to the rising popularity of the game, with the Ponyville team and friends being sent over. While at the museum pre-match, Rainbow Dash meets with Quibblepants, who's pretending to be a sport pony in order to impress Windsprint, the daughter of Clear Sky, a pony he's dating. Dash agrees to help Quibble look like more of an athlete to impress his potential stepdaughter, but he's so unathletic he fails in every lesson. So Rainbow Dash, not wanting to admit she failed at something, brings Quibblepants and his family onto the field for a halftime exhibition match against the Ponyville team. Wind is impressed by this, but not so much when Quibble's constant failures come into play, made worse when he attempts to rules lawyer his way into continuing the match. Eventually he goes back to the stands in failure, only for his knowledge of a Buckball almanac to come in handy in explaining the mechanics of the game to Windsprint. They finally bond over the statistical side of the game. She's All Yak. Twilight is bringing a Ponyville traditional dance to the School of Friendship, renaming it to the Amity Ball, as it's no longer just for ponies. Sandbar asks Yona to the dance and she accepts, only to realize she doesn't know how to act pony-like. When she sees Rarity prepping for the ball, she asks for help, and Rarity spends a montage getting her to behave more like a pony. Rarity recruits the help of most of the rest of the main six to teach her how to better fit in with pony high society and undo all her Yakistani habits. After a second montage, Eliza Doolittle, Yona, is more pony-esque and ready for the ball. Sandbar is taken aback by this transformation as it was Yona he asked out, not the pony who showed up. The ball begins and Yona trips over her dress because she never practiced the pony lessons all at once, knocking over the decorations and fleeing in embarrassment. On one hand, it's pretty easy to predict the plot and moral of this episode in advance. Twilight basically says as much at the start of it. It's about being yourself because that's the version of you want to be. But to Yona, it's not about impressing Sandbar by being a different creature, but about not embarrassing him in front of the rest of the ponies. She was transforming mostly to have the confidence to focus on spending time with Sandbar, rather than second-guessing everything she did during the party. Of course, it's impossible to prevent overthinking by thinking even more, so she ends up making mistakes due to trying to be a pony when she isn't. Sandbar finds Yona at the treehouse, pouting that she ruined the party when Sandbar says he doesn't care about that, but about her. The rest of the Student 6 escorts her back to the room, where Twilight gives the couple a trophy for being best friends at the event. And then Yona teaches the rest of the party how to dance like a yak, rather than the slow cotillion they were doing before. Frenemies. Grogar's angels, Tirek, Chrysalis, and Cozy Glow, are being ordered to work together to better support his evil plans to destroy Twilight and her friends, though each of them wants to be in charge themselves, refusing to cooperate. Cozy Glow attempts to teach them teamwork to be more effective, but this song and lesson doesn't stick because they still believe they ought to be in charge. Grogar then sends them on an errand to retrieve his old bell atop Mount Everhoof, where most of his old power is sealed. Despite being sent together, they each go their separate ways to try and beat the other two to the peak. But none of them's able to make it up as the winds are too strong for Chrysalis, the pony living near its base refuses to be manipulated by Cozy, and Tirek recognizes that it's impossible, sitting back to watch the others fail first so he can gloat. But once they regroup at the base of the mountain, they begin talking about their failures to defeat the main six, laughing over how great it was during the brief moments where they had succeeded. After sharing this laugh, they agree to try to scale the mountain again, this time coordinating their efforts and passing up the opportunities to betray one another so they can grab this powerful bell. They decide to not just take out Twilight and the others, but to go after Grogar, as he's more powerful than the three of them individually. They pretend like they failed to retrieve the bell, and fake like they're still loyal. It's interesting to see the bad guys of the show working together, embodying the morals that the main characters typically reserve for reformed antagonists and each other. The power of friendship is capable of solving any problem, but what if the problem is how to destroy the main six and their pony friends? It's one thing to show Grogar blasting a laser and destroying something with his power, but the audience has seen 8 seasons of guys who shoot lasers being defeated, and likely won't feel intimidated by a villain who can do that. It's showing the bad guys using the same powers as the ones they fight that really sells the intimidation factor, but it also shows a potential hole in their long-term strategy too. Sweet and Smoky. Smolder takes time off school to visit her brother in the Dragonlands as he's been depressed lately, with Spike coming along so it'll count as a friendship lesson. Fluttershy joins them as she's learned that Ember's having trouble overseeing the hatching of dragon eggs, and because she wants to be surrounded by the dragon babies. They arrive in the Dragonlands where Spike's cheer-up kit is made fun of by Garble, who Spike is horrified to learn is Smolder's brother. Spike and Smolder attempt to cheer up Garble anyway, though he not only refuses to admit anything's wrong, but he also keeps making fun of Spike for trying, constantly testing Spike's temper. Eventually, Spike gives up on spending time around a dragon who keeps teasing him for caring, returning to Fluttershy and Ember as they struggle to figure out why the eggs are shaking. Spike quickly learns it's because the lava pool beneath the hatching grounds has been drained by Garble's friends to surf, and it's too late to fix the pool. Fluttershy attempts to take over for Spike, finding Garble when she follows the sound of bongos, where she learns the dragon is actually a very sensitive slam poet. He simply makes fun of others in an attempt to look tough in public. They're all called back to the hatching grounds as Ember's ordering them to breathe fire on the eggs to make enough heat to hatch them, though they're still short. Garble's always been depicted as an antagonistic sort of dragon who embodies all the stereotypes of his race, but this episode manages to explain why he acts this way, and why every dragon acts the way they do. It isn't like he's a bad guy, he just uses that behavior to appear like the others. It's a self-fulfilling cycle of anger and hatred to cover for a lack of it. Every dragon is pent up, pretending they're someone they're not, and so they end up acting even softer in private to compensate, which makes them feel guilty for doing so then they act out even more in public to feel like they fit in. It's Smolder and Spike who set an example of what they could live like if they didn't care so much what others thought about them, but instead of realizing that they don't actually need to be so miserable all the time, they double down, making fun of those who they ought to be looking up to. Because no one wants to be the first one to stop fitting in, and thus the only one not fitting in. Seeing the dragon eggs freezing, Garble decides to stop being afraid of himself, and he pulls out his bongos, speaking some poetry out loud so the other dragons will make fun of him, their laughter heating up their breath, saving the babies. For this, Garble is considered a hero because he opened himself up to being made fun of, just like Spike was doing before, and Ember orders them to be more like him in the future, something the dragons are happy to do now that the stigma's gone. Going to seed. Sweet Apple Acres is undergoing the Great Confluence, when all the apples are ripe to be plucked at once. Since they'll be busy for the next few days, Granny Smith invites help from Goldie Delicious, though she fills Apple Bloom's head with stories of harvest aiding great seedlings, and the family becomes obsessed with laying traps for this cryptid instead of helping with the massive harvest. On the second day of the harvest, there's a mysterious pattern of apples in a field, which the older women attribute to the Great Seedling. Applejack suspects them of having placed the apples in this pattern overnight, though they deny it. It does, however, convince Applebloom to continue setting traps, most of which catch the sleepy and exhausted Big Mac instead of a beast. When Applejack tries to tell her sister to work instead of play, it's revealed that she was once just as excited about the Great Seedling as Applebloom, only to have spent an entire day in one of her own traps, while every pony else had to work harder because of her absence. The issue here is that Applebloom is trying to have fun chasing legends, while Applejack is trying to be pragmatic and hardworking. There's nothing wrong with having fun dreaming about the Great Seedling, as long as the work still gets done. But there might be a problem with working so hard, there's no time to allow a filly to be imaginative. Applejack dislikes that Applebloom is chasing the seedling, not solely because it's a waste of harvesting time, but a waste of energy that should be spent overworking oneself. And it's overworking that ends up being the cause of the mysterious events around the farm. Applejack and Applebloom spend the night camped out together to look for the Great Seedling, eventually waking up when they hear their traps going off. After a brief chase through the farm, they discover that the Great Seedling was actually a sleepwalking Big Mac, too tired from being overworked. Realizing this, they decide to go back to work, though Applebloom still gets to keep her childlike sense of wonder, while Applejack enjoyed the nostalgic nights staying up. Student Council. Starlight has a bracelet connected to her office's door, letting her know to teleport back whenever a student needs help. As the main six are busy with preparations for the spring solstice, which is supposed to be the spring equinox, I guess that lacks the alliterative appeal, Starlight is stuck handling every problem every creature has, mostly Silverstream asking for help with tiny tasks. This drives a wedge between Trixie and Starlight, as Starlight has been blowing off preparations for Maud and Mudbriar's own Equinox party that they agreed to help with. Trixie ends up having to do all the work herself, with Starlight lamenting that she missed out on an opportunity to spend time with her friend because she was busy with work. It's a problem where both sides of the issue are understandable. On one hand, Starlight has an obligation to her students at her counseling job and can't simply ignore their needs. On the other, she's made an obligation to her friends and herself to have fun and throw a party, one that she's ignoring for other work. It's not like any of these is more important than the other, and her issue is trying to find a balance between her students and her friends. She decides to remove the bracelet and have a party with her friends, only for Terramar to urgently need to get her attention as his sister's gone missing, having not returned home for spring break like she was supposed to. Blaming herself for not being there for a student, Starlight rushes over to find her, discovering to her horror that Silverstream may have gone into the Everfree Forest to study cockatrices alone. The group heads out to find her, with Mudbriar getting turned to stone when they're attacked by a swarm of the creatures, something Maud Pie doesn't mind. They eventually find Silverstream in the treehouse, having tamed a cockatrice that she named Edith. Edith reverts Mudbriar, and they go back to the party, with Starlight deciding to set office hours so she can have a proper boundary between her work and home lives. Because the solution was never about being forced to choose between the two, or even to decide how much effort to put into one or the other, but setting a predefined line and making sure every creature knows your boundaries. The Last Crusade. While being watched by her aunts Holiday and Lofty, Scootaloo receives a letter saying that her birth parents are finally returning home to Ponyville after being missing for 9 seasons. They visit her at school, where the Jane Goodall and Steve Irwin XPs wow the other students with their collection of exotic animals from around the globe, and the important research they're doing. Research that was too dangerous to bring their daughter along on, hence why they were never around. Although Scootaloo is excited to reunite with her parents, they bring bad news. They're starting new jobs, and they want their daughter to travel the world with them. While Snap Shudder and Maine Allgood view this as an opportunity for the families to stick together, Scootaloo's upset that she'll have to leave the Cutie Mark Crusaders and the work they've done together. From here, it kinda seems like the episode's about to set up a decision between her birth family and the family that raised her, but it doesn't really make it sound like a choice. Instead, CMCs make an effort to trick the explorers into staying in Ponyville with costumes of rare creatures and potions that tie their hooves. With these plans all failing, Scootaloo runs to her aunts to live with them instead, only to see they've made a quilt inspired by the CMCs that reminds them of why they can't split up. Instead, the Crusaders make a plan to show off how useful their work is to Ponyville. And when Mayor Mare gives them a key to the city, Scootaloo's parents realize that their daughter's work is just as important as theirs, and it would be hypocritical to separate her from all of that. I think that if this episode had come up in an earlier season, it would have had a different message than it does. But after being gone for 9 seasons and having so many implications that Scootaloo was basically orphaned, having her parents suddenly appear to try and act like they have their daughter's best interest in mind makes the issue in this episode more one-sided. It feels less like they're doing what they think is best, and more like they're completely oblivious to who their daughter is, to the point of hurting her through negligence even while they're around. I could understand their point of view if they were introduced in like season 2 or 3, but by this point the accomplishments of Scootaloo feel like things done not in absence of her parents, but in spite of them. Between Dark and Dawn. The main 6 and Spike are dealing with a giant turtle when the 2 princesses arrive to help, even though the problem was already taken care of. After they help to solve so many other solved problems, the rest of the main 6 discusses with them a soft retirement. Celestia and Luna will travel around the world doing things that aren't princessy, as Twilight and the others get practice running Equestria. They each head their separate ways, with the princesses enjoying several touristy things, but there's some friction as Luna is fascinated by the mundane, quiet moments, as Celestia is seeking thrills. They split apart as they assume they'll have more fun separate than together, but without their sister around, they begin to feel lonely, as well as noticing all the little things their sister used to do to keep the vacation manageable. Luna and Celestia end up in the same spot, realizing they still share one thing in common, the desire to spend time together, and they watch Twilight struggle to keep the sun and moon balanced without them around. This is because during the B-plot, where the main 6 are put in charge of a ceremony for Castle Swans, Twilight ignores the lesson she learned before about delegating responsibility and asking for help, turning away the planning committee to do everything on her own. The main 6 soon realizes they're in over their heads because of the amount of work it takes to manage the kingdom, when they hear from the committee that the princesses never did the actual work, simply delegating responsibility to other ponies. This is a criticism I've seen online of the princesses. They don't do enough for the kingdom, but I'd argue that that's missing the point. When there is some threat to Equestria, Princess Celestia doesn't fight it herself, she instead sends Twilight and her friends to do it, basically delegating the responsibility of saving the kingdom to 6 very powerful magical ponies with the power of friendship, which, in this setting, is an incredibly strong force. Good leadership isn't about doing the right thing all the time, but finding some pony who can do one thing right for each thing that needs to be done. The quality of a leader is equal to the quality of those who work for the leader. Celestia and Luna are nothing without their kingdom and its creatures, even if this does get boring for them from time to time. The Last Laugh. The rest of the main 6 has all achieved great things since the start of the show, except Pinkie Pie, who's beginning to worry she has no purpose to her life. So to find one, she's planning on accepting an invitation to Cheese Sandwich's Laugh Factory to learn the secret of comedy success from him. She arrives for a brief tour by the factory's manager, Sand Smirk, where she makes several improvements to the mass-produced gags on the floor. Then she gets to Cheese Sandwich's office, where she learns to their horror that he has lost the ability to laugh. Mr. Sandwich explains that he continued to tour Equestria spreading laughter to others after his last appearance, trying to put humor into the hooves of as many ponies as possible. But to do this, he started to become separated from the actual laughter, losing his ability to laugh because he hasn't seen another pony laugh in years. Pinkie Pie tries several gags to get him to laugh or smile, but none of these work, even though both Sans and Cheese agree the jokes are objectively funny. But when Sans smirks laments the old days where Cheese Sandwich was more involved in comedy, Pinkie realizes that it isn't about making ponies laugh, but seeing ponies laugh. She gets him to tell some jokes to the factory's employees and is soon able to do an entire musical number, because if you have Weird Al, you're gonna get him to show off. And soon Cheese Sandwich has found his purpose in life again, one that Pinkie Pie shares as she gets back to the others. 2, 4, 6, great. Rainbow Dash is excited to help the School of Friendship's Buckball team prepare for a game against Celestia School, only to learn her responsibility is to train the cheerleaders for a routine. Each of the cheer squad has their own motivations for cheering, but Rainbow Dash ignores them and their talents to watch the practices from the sidelines because she doesn't really care about the squad. After they confront her about their lack of improvement, Rainbow Dash tries different ways to delegate the responsibilities, like asking her friends for help or even putting some pony else in charge. None of this works, though Rainbow Dash isn't observant enough to notice, until she's confronted by Smolder, who, despite admitting she's only on the team because her friends are, calls her out for not caring. Rainbow Dash's lack of care about the sport of cheerleading isn't what the cheerleaders are picking up on, but rather, they interpret her disinterest as a lack of care about them. It's interesting that Rainbow Dash's reaction to being the head cheerleader was to rely on old morals and lessons from other episodes. She doesn't know much about cheer, so she delegates. She asks her friends for help. And none of these strategies works because Dash, from the beginning, didn't care if they worked. Rainbow Dash tries again, this time making a better interest in her students as she fixes their individual issues while letting their strengths shine. The routine is a success and the Friendship School's team, well, they don't win, but Dash doesn't care. The cheerleaders had a good time and the audience was cheering along, the only things that matter. Not because she wanted the cheer team to do well, but because she wanted the creatures on the cheer team to do well. A Trivial Pursuit. Twilight is hoping to win the Trivia Trot for the third time in a row, having made elaborate plans for every contingency that could occur during the contest. The only thing she hasn't planned for is Pinkie Pie joining in and then becoming her randomly assigned teammate. Twilight attempts to ignore her worries and focus on carrying the team, but Pinkie's too excitable and keeps ringing in the wrong answers first. So Twilight tries multiple new strategies to distract her, and when these don't work, begins arguing over pedantic rule interpretations to disqualify the other team's points. Eventually, she gives up on Pinkie and disqualifies her own partner, working together with Sunburst as he has a high winning percentage and his partner was disqualified by Twilight before. The two of them make a comeback, though this is in spite of Twilight's efforts, as Sunburst is the more talented of the two. Realizing he is treating her the same way she was treating Pinkie, Twilight apologizes and accepts Pinkie Pie back on her team, sacrificing all her points to do so. In the end, the Pinkie and Twilight team loses, but they have fun doing so. This is a predictable enough plot that the summary's hardly necessary. It even falls into the same pitfalls that the more predictable episodes have. Of course, Twilight forgets her friendship lessons because she is too competitive for her own good, and of course, she relearns the lesson to bring Pinkie back on her team. Twilight even says as much during the episode, that she really should have known better, but that's not the point of this episode. The trivia questions are all things that viewers would be able to answer as they're all based on descriptions of earlier plots and their elements. I actually got a few of the questions right before the characters did, even made the Tyrek mistake Twilight made too. This episode not only makes a series of callbacks in this way, but shows off the expressiveness of each character while keeping these exaggerated faces in line with how they act before. Dash and AJ have brought back an old rivalry. Fan favorites Maud and Mudbriar are teamed together, and Sunburst, acting very Twilight-esque, allows her own behavior to be put in perspective. Sure, it's a trivia contest that's for the fans of the show, but being a fan isn't a contest. You're not trying to one-up other fans, but share in what you love to do. The Summer Sun Setback. Grogar's angels use the opportunity of him leaving to brainstorm ways to unlock the power of his bell, deciding they need to break into the Canterlot Library to do research. They attempt to use the cover of the preparations for the Summer Sun Festival to sneak in while the ponies are all too busy. And by the ponies, this means Twilight, who's finally managed to internalize her earlier lessons to delegate responsibility for planning the festival to other ponies, instead of freaking out over minor details. This goes directly contrary to the previous episode, where Twilight had one of her most animated freakouts over a low-stakes game of trivia. But I'm willing to forgive this due to the difference in tone between the episodes. Twilight is willing to let herself go mad over something silly and simple, because it's something silly and simple. There's nothing really at stake other than a short argument with a friend if she snaps. Here, she's planning a massive party, so she understands to repress a few of her worst personality traits to focus on the mission in front of her. Self-control isn't about changing who you are 100% of the time, it's about knowing when and when not to try. When she learns that the princesses plan to announce their retirements at the festival, she adds a few minor changes to the plan, then sends the main 6 on their separate ways to handle these. But unbeknownst to them, Grogar's angels have been causing havoc behind the scenes to serve as distractions as they make their way closer to the library. And after checking up on these tasks, the main 6 realize the festival's turning into a disaster. They don't want Twilight to have another freakout, so they attempt to solve the problems without letting her know about them, only to make things worse because they understand they're not able to fix these issues easily. Twilight finally learns the truth of the preparations, but doesn't freak out. Instead, she starts to delegate tasks and brainstorm solutions, proving that she really has managed some of her more neurotic tendencies. Everything is fixed in time for the festival, and Twilight announces the retirement of the princesses, replacing the Summer Sun Festival with a new holiday celebrating their reign. The main six celebrates that they can handle any problem coming their way before the episode cuts back to a big problem coming their way. Grogar's angels not only unlocking the bell's power, but realizing it was easy to turn the ponies of Equestria against each other. She talks to Angel. Angel keeps interrupting Fluttershy as she attempts to get through her packed daily schedule at the animal sanctuary. So the two of them go to Zecora's to work out their differences at her offer. Angel is upset because he used to be one of only a few animals and got most of Fluttershy's attention, but now she has so many others to take care of, Angel's just one of many. Zecora gives them a potion to help them understand one another, which is pretty obviously a setup to have them swap bodies magically. The switch happens and Angel, as Fluttershy, immediately begins wandering around getting into trouble. Fluttershy, as Angel, implores him to at least finish off her chores while she returns to Zecora's to ask for a remedy. But Fluttershy struggles to make it through the ever-free forest alone, and she can't ask for help. And Angel rushes through Fluttershy's chores as he doesn't get why she wastes so much time with little things. Fluttershy makes it to Zecora's hut, where she says the only cure is for both of them to apologize at the same time. And by the time she finally makes the trek back to the sanctuary, she's exhausted and collapses. Of all the villains to redeem, it's interesting that Angel gets his own episode of this season. It's not that the psychopathic rabbit has some tragic backstory, or that even the audience is meant to sympathize with him at all. He's just kind of a jerk who's used to taking advantage of Fluttershy's kindness. It's not until seeing what happens when they try to swap that he appreciates all she does, not only for him, but for so many others. Angel tries to help, and makes things worse. Just having a neutral relationship with Fluttershy is something he ought to be grateful for. Because Angel had such a bad job managing the sanctuary, he's unprepared to deal with the emergency situation of Fluttershy collapsing without all the animals working together, something they refuse to do for Angel's sake. So Angel finally asks them not to help him, but to help Fluttershy, and they agree to work together to get her some carrot extract to recover. In this, Angel's basically admitting he's too unlikable for any creature to want to help, except for Fluttershy herself. Once Fluttershy's cured, the two swap back, with Dr. Fauna asking Zecora to never do that again. Dragon dropped. Rarity tries to recruit Spike for an excursion to pick up gemstones like they always do, but Spike is preoccupied with his friend Gabby, a pen pal who's been visiting Ponyville more frequently lately. Realizing that her pack mule is no longer willing to follow her around, Rarity starts trying to figure out where she went wrong, going so far as to apologize as she assumes she must have offended him in some way. When Spike is unsure why she's apologizing, Rarity tries to make Spike's time with her more appealing by doing all the stuff he likes to do instead of following her interests, and the two spend several days together without Gabby present. Gabby eventually sees Spike playing O&O and he wrote saying he was too tired to, and she stops hanging out with Spike, who starts sulking. As early as episode 1, Spike has been characterized as having an unrequited crush on Rarity, though not an unnoticed one. Most of the time the two spend together involves Spike serving Rarity in some way that began escalating until soon their relationship appeared as one side taking advantage of the other. This isn't just Rarity slowly becoming manipulative, but rather a result of flanderization of their relationship, an inevitability of any show that runs for a long time. Spike is obsessed with Rarity, and Rarity uses this obsession to make him do chores while he's paid by getting time near her. But to have this play out over and over would get old, so the writers have to escalate, or else not include this character beat at all. At a point, the relationship either gets toxic or gets cut off for the sake of tone, and this episode is about the latter, as Rarity apologizes for the former. Eventually, Rarity feels upset at seeing Gabby sulking the same way she was when Spike stopped following her. She apologizes, this time to Gabby, and when Spike sees her doing this, the confusion is cleared up, with the two agreeing to spend a normal amount of time together. Even if Spike no longer has a crush on Rarity, they can still be friends. Relationships change over time, but a small change is no reason to give up entirely. A horseshoe in. Since Twilight's about to become a princess, she hands over the school to Starlight Glimmer, and since Starlight is worried about this responsibility, she decides to use the power of friendship to delegate responsibility. This means she needs a vice head mare, and Trixie assumes she'll get the job because she's Starlight's best friend. Starlight insists on hosting an actual group interview instead of just giving away the position. Several ponies sign up for this position, including Trixie, and Starlight begins to walk them through some of their responsibilities to see how they react. Filthy Rich is cut after she tries to turn a classroom into a sales pitch for her book. Big Mac is cut because his vocabulary is too small to properly explain things during a student-teacher conference. And eventually Trixie's also cut after she accidentally teleports dangerous fauna into the classroom on a reverse field trip. After a shouting match, Starlight laments that she's going to have to fire her best friend because she's a bad fit for the job, but her real regret is that she didn't say anything sooner because she knew early on Trixie wouldn't cut it, and she strung along a friend because of nepotism. But Twilight visits, reminding her that just because a friend isn't a good fit for one part of your life doesn't mean they can't be included elsewhere. Citing a moment where she yelled at a neglectful parent on behalf of Gallus, Starlight gives Trixie a different offer as student counselor because she cares about the kids. Daring Doubt. Fluttershy's recently gotten into the Daring Do franchise, showing off the latest book, not written by Yearling, but a competing author, George R.R. Groom QQ Martingale. This book is a take on events that makes her rival Cabaleron look more sympathetic, shortly revealed to be written by Cabaleron in a disguise as he's once again trying to make his rival look bad. Dash attempts to come up with a plan to thwart him, but Fluttershy just wants to understand which side of the events is the more authentic one. For her kindness and attempt at understanding, Cabaleron offers to let Fluttershy join his crew as they seek out a truth-telling amulet. Season 9's been all about redeeming each of the villains who are open to redemption, going back through the list of bad guys and examining potential avenues to explain that they're not really bad folks at all, just misunderstood or whatever. This episode goes back and forth a bit on whether Cabaleron is really just trying to keep his museum open, or if he's just after the money. And by the end of the episode, it's clear that it's both. He's motivated by money, sure, not just to keep the museum open, but to get rich doing it. There are a lot of other ways he could have made money, and if he can share knowledge with the world in the process, that's an added bonus. In fact, none of the ponies in this episode are really evil in the sense that a simple kid's story would have presented them, like the Daring Do franchise itself. When they all make it to the temple with the amulet, they in turn explain their motivations. Even the guardian of the amulet is just doing his job in protecting the rainforest, a job each of the other ponies thinks they can do better. In the end, Yearling and Martingale team up to write a more authentic account of events, only to lose to the newest rising author, Ahui Zodal and his memoirs. Growing up is hard to do. While lamenting that the adults in their life are too busy with other responsibilities to take them to the Appaloosa County Fair, the Cutie Mark Crusaders accidentally wish upon a strange flower Fluttershy and Twilight are studying. They glow a bit and then become older. Now that they're adults, they assume they can do whatever they want to, boarding the train and celebrating that everything they do is now right, before accidentally missing their stop, winding up in a swamp. They struggle to get through the swamp for a while, coming out near two younger ponies, Spur and Biscuit, who are debating whether to take their pet Bloofy to the fair or if it can handle crowds. Spur spent more time with the pet and thinks he can't deal with the crowd, but Biscuit wants to have fun at the fair, and the CMCs take his side because they also want to go out. This proves to be a bad idea, as the CMCs ignore the ponies they're supposed to be watching after, as well as Bloofy, who starts to grow mad at the attention after he's entered into an animal show. This episode highlights the difference between growing up and growing older, that just because some pony looks older doesn't mean they're going to act that way. It's the experience that comes with a life fully lived that makes you an adult, not your age. This is why none of the adults the CMCs knew would have helped them before. They had responsibilities and couldn't drop everything to go have fun for a day. The Crusaders didn't understand that. They put themselves into the position that they wanted the other ponies to get into, then failed at the challenges presented by that out of a lack of maturity. Fluttershy and Twilight eventually figure out that the flower was a wish-granting one that loses its petals after each wish to prevent it from being a plot hole later on, and they head to the fair to find the fillies. They see the disaster unfolding, and Fluttershy encourages Spur to calm her pet down. Her pet, because she's the one who did the hard work to watch him. Bloofy calms himself, and the day is saved by a younger pony who acts more mature than the adults, who are supposed to be helping, as the CMCs learn their lesson. You can't rush growing up, because the time it takes to mature is part of maturity. The Big Mac Question. The episode is framed as Spike, Discord, the Cutie Mark Crusaders, and Mrs. Cake speaking confessionals to the camera, as they explain that, in spite of their good intentions, they managed to accidentally ruin everything, and then it cuts to that everything told in 2 stories. The first is about Spike and Discord discovering that Big Mac's about to propose to Sugarbelle, and he has asked his friends to help with the proposal. But Sugarbelle missed the hints they've dropped, rushing by and forcing Discord and Spike to improvise solutions that wind up burning Miss Cake's baked goods and bringing a bunch of apples to life to deliver the message, who then morph into a gigantic apple after terrorizing Ponyville. The other half of the episode sees the CMCs and Miss Cake helping Sugarbelle with her own proposal, rushing by the hints Discord's dropping to try to preserve the secret. In their attempts to find Big Mac for the message, they end up luring the giant mutant apple to Ponyville after Discord tries to teleport it away to get rid of it. And then the secrets are both out as the proposals clash, making everything worse. But Big Mac and Sugarbelle leave the others, returning to the farm to propose simply, because that's what they both wanted. Even though things have gone wrong, things usually do, and it's how easily they recover that determines how strong the relationship will be, just as the apples and pears had overcome adversity before. The wedding begins with the characters from the intro revealed to be catching up Applejack on everything that led up to the wedding, as Big Mac and Sugarbelle are finally wed. The ending of the end. Twilight's coronation is coming up and she's surprisingly relaxed about it, confident that her friends will handle any issues that come up. As they're making their preparations, they notice strange behavior from the ponies of Equestria, like how they refuse to talk directly to any pony or let Applejack walk around unescorted. The main 6 attributes this to pre-coronation jitters and attempts to continue planning when Discord walks up to them, walking, not teleporting as usual. As it turns out, Grogar's angels are not Grogar's angels, but Discord's. He's disguised himself as Grogar to gather the others in what he was planning to be a confidence-building exercise. Unfortunately, since they actually managed to obtain Grogar's bell, they drained his magic and stored it inside, leaving him without the ability to serve as the safety net for the impending invasion. Twilight fears that all the world saving she's done in the last season was all faked, but doesn't try to dwell on it as she orders many of her allies out to defend Equestria. But the pillars are no match for an enhanced Tyrek, who defeats them all and absorbs their magic. Starlight is taken out by Chrysalis while the Friendship School was being evacuated into the school's basement. And Cozy Glow arrives in the throne room to fight the princesses, absorbing their magic into the bell before nearly being defeated by the main 6 working together. But Tyrix and Chrysalis rejoin Cozy to save her, overpowering the rest of the ponies, who work together to hold off the attack as Discord references Lord of the Rings, ordering Twilight to flee the throne room to get help. The 3 villains have all the protagonist ponies locked away as they argue over what to do next, each assuming they'll be in charge after Twilight's defeated. Discord apologizes to the others and makes it up to them by rage-baiting the other 3 into fighting over his power sealed away inside the bell and too chaotic and weird for any one creature to control. Tyrek shoots him and he deflects it using pieces of the magic-blocking throne inside the castle to break Starlight out, who then frees the others. The main 6 searches for Twilight, trying to meet up with her to learn of her plan to save the world again. But everywhere they go, they see the same story. The Earth Ponies, Pegasi, and Unicorns are all wary of one another, sheltering away and leaving the rest of Equestria to fend for themselves. Finally, they meet Twilight in the Crystal Empire, locked away in her room because she's failed to strategize a way out of the mess. The rest of her friends cheer her up, saying that even if Twilight doesn't believe in herself, she ought to believe in them, as they believe in her. She agrees to try again, even if they still don't have much of a plan other than believing in each other. All of this as the Wendigos come back, terrorizing Equestria because of the different types of pony fighting. The main 6 stands up to the villains, ready to fight and coming up with a plan to take back the bell. A few friendship lasers later, they haven't succeeded in taking it, but they're shielded by a new source of power as all the creatures of Equestria have come out of hiding to support the main 6 at the request of the students of the School of Friendship, who have taken Twilight's lessons to heart and taught their friends and neighbors. The main takeaway from this episode is that Twilight doubts whether she's ready to rule over Equestria, and she's right when she thinks she can't solve all the problems facing her. Where she's not right is in assuming that she'll have to do it alone. A kingdom is only as strong as the creatures in the kingdom, and Twilight can draw strength from them. Tirek, Chrysalis, and Cozy all fought over who would be in charge, even after learning about how much more powerful they were together. Because that was always their plan from the beginning, to rule over others instead of ruling with them. Their undoing was the fact that they refused to cooperate, and that they incited this same paranoia in their subjects, attempting to keep them in line with fear rather than loyalty. They could rule over their bodies, but never their hearts. At the end of the day, it was the friendship they learned from a ruler who served the creatures instead of the other way around that they went back to. Equestria is a place that can only exist because the ponies who made it worked together, and this isn't just in reference to the Wendigos threatening to destroy the land if they don't. Rulers who try to force division can never actually rule over the land of Equestria, just a barren landscape of fear and rot. Even if they had been successful in their conquest, the three villains of this episode could never rule Equestria. They would rule something else. Equestria is not the land itself. It's the creatures living there and the ideas they believe in, something that can't be blasted away by a big laser beam. Twilight and the rest of Equestria use the power of friendship to unlock the sealed powers inside the bell, draining the magic from the villains and leaving them vulnerable to being sealed away in stone as Discord once was. With everything solved, Twilight decides to postpone her coronation to put the repairs of the castle and everything else first. She then ends the episode by going back to the donut shop from the end of Season 1, spending just a little more time with her friends before the responsibilities set in. The last problem. Luster Dawn, one of the students at Twilight's School of Magic, is struggling to maintain her studies in magic and friendship, preferring to focus on the former because she doesn't see the value in the latter. So to illustrate why friendship is important, Twilight tells her the story of the day of her coronation. Twilight was nervous about moving to Canterlot because she thought that all her friends would be too busy with their business to spend any time with her, shown by each of them being too busy with preparations for the ceremony to give a proper goodbye. When Twilight confesses that she's worried about this, they agree to spend a little more time together on the train ride over, only to end up behind in their work on the coronation, causing the actual ceremony to be a disaster without them. Luster Dawn assumes this means that Twilight's friendships all ended because they had to choose between their careers and friendship, preferring the work because it meant more to them. But then each of the main six comes into the throne room during the present for their monthly meeting of the Friendship Council, something they created to ensure they would never be separated for long. It's a smart choice for a 3-part finale to end the series on 2 plots, the first 2 episodes being a story about all the recurring villains coming back for a final attempt at taking over that's thwarted by Twilight coming into her own as a princess of friendship, proving she really can handle the responsibility that's been building up for the last 9 seasons. And then the actual, real final episode isn't some world-ending stakes, but rather a group of friends wondering if they'll still be friends after the end credits roll. Because thematically, that is a lot more important to be told. The average viewer at home, hopefully, will never have to deal with an apocalypse that they have to defeat with the power of friendship. But worrying about how long you'll stay in contact with your friends is something we all experience at some point. Whether it's a school graduation or someone moving away or just slowly drifting apart because of diverging interests, every single friend you have right now is someone you might not be friends with forever, unless you put in the effort to stay friends with them. It's actionable advice that any pony can appreciate and therefore gets more prominence than the big friendship laser battle. Because friendships are important enough that they're worth the constant effort it takes to maintain them, efforts that Luster Dawn learns about as the series ends on a musical number that doubles as an excuse for a "Where Are They Now" montage across Equestria, so audiences can get a little bit of closure about their favorite characters, but not so much as to make a definitive end to their story. Because the stories told in the show are just a fraction of the real adventures that every pony will go on, shown as the storybook that opened the first episode closes shut. This is the end of part 2 of this video and a mini conclusion to this half of the show. The full version of the conclusion to my My Little Pony retrospective will come out as a part of the full-length video, meaning that to see my thoughts on My Little Pony as a whole, you'll need to watch that one, which ought to be linked in the description as well as on screen right now. This is probably unnecessary to do. I'm just trying to mess with the watch statistics a little bit to see what happens when a non-insignificant part of the audience all skips to the very end of a video. The second half of the show I feel is overall weaker for a binge watcher coming in after the fact. I can recognize the desire to try and make a show that appeals directly to the audience as they exist currently, and a few of the episodes seem to be made with brony kind in mind, directly addressing folks who aren't just watching each episode, but going online and discussing it right after they come out. This is appealing when you are a part of this discussion, but when you're coming in afterwards and don't need to wait to see what the showrunners think of you, it feels like there's a pandering to a demand that's no longer there. The show is trying to say something instead of telling a story. I'm only being a bit negative because in the overall conclusion I'm far more positive. I generally try to avoid discussing shows that I dislike, or anticipate I'll dislike, because it's exhausting to be negative for the 80,000 plus words of a script like this. And there are a few too many guys out there doing the same thing already. Anyway, this end section will be cut out of the full version of the retrospective, so it doesn't matter too much what else I say here. Rarity is still best pony.